On the simple wooden table was a very strange black machine. Luong spoke up. Timothy, aren't you worried about how to communicate at that time? This machine can solve our communication problem. Queen Timothy looked at the machine on the table, then turned to look at Luong. Her expression was a bit skeptical. Really? 100 hearings are worth one seeing. Luong wanted everyone to test it out for themselves. He immediately asked, did she tell Robin to go to the supermarket? The queen replied, yes. Then Luong gave her a piece of paper and told her, then, now write a sentence. The best answer is if the answer she gets can definitely identify the other party as Robin. This girl will pass the news to Robin later. Hearing this, Queen Timothy replied with a face full of interest, somewhat amused. Let me see. Then she took the paper and started writing. After finishing writing, she happily gave it to the girl who was assigned to deliver the message. After receiving the paper, the girl sat down on the chair next to the table with the machine, and immediately started tapping the buttons on the machine. In a certain room in the supermarket, Robin was leisurely sucking on a lollipop while watching the blue-haired youth working in front of him. A piece of paper slowly rolled up from the same machine on Queen Timothy's side, and the blue-haired youth said, here it is. He took the paper that had just been sent and gave it to Robin, who was still chewing on the candy in his hand. Mr. Robin, this is the news His Highness Timothy wrote for you. Robin picked up the paper and read the content inside. His expression was a bit helpless but also full of affection. Your Majesty, she really is. A moment later, on Timothy's side, a piece of paper was passed back through the machine. The girl turned back and said, I've answered. Hearing that, Timothy quickly ran over and urged, hurry up and write to me. The girl immediately held up the paper in front of her, on which were 2 lines of text. One line was that you like white dancers, the other line was that you are addicted to their bodies. Luong looked at the paper with such words and felt embarrassed. Timothy happily confirmed, it was indeed him. Luong asked with a face full of doubt, what exactly did she write? Queen Timothy heard him ask and immediately mischievously covered her mouth with a piece of paper, blushing and teasing. Oh, is His Majesty Luong really curious? Can't he tell him? As if he had predicted her next words, Luong directly refused, no, let's leave. The queen was visibly upset when she heard that. She pouted and snorted, not teasing anymore. Ellie then turned to Yuffie and asked, did this news really come from the supermarket? Yuffie nodded happily and affirmed, of course. Queen Timothy reached out to touch the device on the table. She couldn't help but sigh. As expected of His Majesty Luong, the communication problem was solved. Hearing that, Luong immediately explained further, but the operation was still quite complicated. It couldn't be learned in a short time. I will arrange a team of staff to go to Yadian with you first. When that time comes, you can contact me at any time. I will also arrange corresponding aid for you. Timothy immediately turned his head and smiled happily at Luong and replied, then I will thank you in advance. Then she turned back to look at the whispering machine. Old man Yad, I'm almost home. Ellie sighed. She stared at the queen as if she had some suspicion, but in the end she chose to remain silent. Above the spaceship's deck, Luong led Queen Timothy's group forward. A guard took his place and reported, Your Majesty, the squad has assembled and can set off at any time. Luong was very pleased when he heard this and said, let's go. The other person immediately raised his hand to his chest to receive the order. Queen Timothy walked up the stairs of the spaceship. Before entering the cabin, she turned back to wave goodbye. Then I'll be going. These past few days have been fortunately taken care of by Your Majesty. When I get Yadian back, I'll invite everyone over as guests. Luong looked at her and replied, I will go. Have a safe trip. The spaceship took off and flew up high. Luong and Ellie below still couldn't take their eyes off it. In the cabin, Robin started teasing me. I thought His Majesty would have to do something to get on the plane. Queen Timothy settled down and boarded the plane. I'm not the type of woman who does all sorts of things before parting ways. Anyway, the days are long. Later when I get Yadian back, that is when he comes to my area, by then it is uncertain. Seeing her face slightly red as she spoke, Robin's eyes were a bit helpless. He could only advise her not to do anything too extreme, affecting diplomatic affairs. Then, Robin turned his face to look at the machine that the blue-haired man was holding in his hand and couldn't help but admire it. To put it bluntly, this thing was truly astonishing. I'm afraid that after we return, His Majesty Luong will make a big move very soon. After the spaceship disappeared from sight, Luong turned around and said to Ellie, let's go, we have to get busy too. Only then did Ellie begin to speak up her thoughts from the moment she saw the capabilities of this machine. Young master, I have an idea, related to the telegraph machine. Hearing this, Luong was a little surprised and exclaimed. In the Imperial study, Ellie spoke up and proposed, young master, I suggest building a large-scale telegraph station. Hearing that, Luong asked, did you find out the good points of this thing? Ellie quickly replied, of course. In the past, many kings did not know what happened to their country. Many times, the king only found out after it was over, but now that the young master has a telegraph, it is completely different. Ellie raised her hand and continued to analyze, if we can set up a large-scale telegraph station and establish related departments, we can quickly get news from everywhere. No matter if it is management, intervention or control, it is much more convenient for us, it is truly a divine weapon for us. After listening to her analysis for a while, Luong quickly replied that he also had this thought, but before that, there was still something to handle. Ellie asked curiously, "What is it?" Luong answered very simply but directly, "We don't have many people who are literate." After hearing this, Ellie immediately opened her mouth and remembered, that's right, this problem is really troublesome. She was so depressed that she bowed her head inside, it seemed like she could only take it slow. However, Luong didn't seem to think so. He suddenly stood up, holding a piece of paper in his hand, approached Ellie and said, "Take this, let's put it in the newspaper." Ellie raised her head and looked, unable to help but be curious. What is this?" Luong looked straight into Ellie's eyes and slowly explained, the Imperial examination, simply put, was a national examination. He wanted all literate people in the country to work for him. In a remote mountainous area, at the foot of a small village, the houses are very simple, in contrast to the grandeur of the Han dynasty. Among the crowd was a girl with white hair and purple eyes. No one knew where she was going. Her name was Shirley. Shirley now lived in a rural area on the eastern border of Yinglu. Although she was still very young, she had already been to many places, from grasslands to royal cities, snowy mountains, and hills. There were many people in the village who admired Shirley, saying that she was young but had a lot of knowledge, but that was not actually traveling, but running away, because she was a beast man. Shirley entered the small house. After closing the door, she reached out and took off the scarf covering her head to reveal her gray ears. The children in the house saw her return and shouted, "Sister Shirley, you're back." Shirley opened her arms to hug her younger siblings, smiling and asking, "Did anything happen at home today?" The blue-haired girl immediately replied, "Someone came today." Shirley looked worried when she heard that. "What?" But the blue-haired little sister quickly reassured her older sister, "Don't worry, we have hoods, so no one will find out that we are beastmen." The little brother next to her stared at the basket she brought back, which contained fresh vegetables. Hearing her sister say that, Shirley let out a sigh of relief. "That's good. What are humans doing here?" her younger brother said innocently. "It seems like a new king has ascended the throne." To add a little more, the first thing immigrants of the Beast Kingdom must remember to survive in this country is to hide their identity. There was a knock on the door and the person outside said, "Sister Shirley, I'm home." The girl walked into the room and took off her scarf, still a beast man. The children in the house saw the girl enter and excitedly shouted, "Sister Dio." Shirley smiled when she saw her, "You're back." The girl named Dio quickly replied with an unrelated sentence, "Today is not bad." Shirley had also finished preparing the food by this time. She called everyone over, "Is that so? Come in quickly and let's eat." To explain what Lin said just now, it can be understood simply like this. In the subconscious of the beastmen here, they all assumed that if they did not disguise themselves, once they were exposed, they would be captured as slaves. The signal to enter the door was, "Today is not bad," indicating that there were no humans outside. No need to be careful. If today is not good, it means that there are humans outside who want to enter. Be careful to hide your tail and ears. Cannot interact too much with humans, cannot attract human curiosity, cannot remove camouflage when outside, if even slightly suspicious, must leave immediately, cannot take the main road when moving, if dangerous, must learn to give up, encountering danger, cannot hesitate and make decisions. Signals, events, etc., there were many more, each and every one of them had to be remembered, remembered those details, just a little carelessness, and they would be forgotten, so they had to read the rules again. There was no scene of Shirley's family's meal going on happily. But deep inside, there must be some uneasiness. If they continue to hide it, only then can they survive safely. What will happen next? Shirley's face couldn't hide the sadness in her eyes. She also thought about the problem after that, but she didn't know, and had never thought about it. Perhaps now they didn't have the right to think. Under the flickering candlelight, Diao spoke up and said, "Sister Shirley, I got some news today. The new king of Yinglu wants to register with everyone in the vicinity. I heard that someone from Chang'an City will be in charge today." Chang'an City is the new capital of Yinglu. Hearing this, Shirley couldn't help but feel nervous. She clenched her fists and signed up. Diao's expression was no better. She frowned and said, "By then, will we be exposed?" Shirley finally had no choice but to say her last resort. There was no other way. It seemed like she could only move. Hearing her sister say that, Diao also stood up and said, "Sister, then I'll go pack and prepare." Luckily, there weren't too many things. Shirley tried to force a smile at her. Well, it was tough. She thought to herself, "Here we go again." The next morning, Lu Feng's men went to the border to start the registration that Dio had mentioned last night. Quite a few people had arrived, including Shirley's family. They all covered their ears and walked away, wanting to go somewhere else. Seeing this, the guards immediately stopped them, feeling embarrassed. "Everyone, this time the king has issued a new order. Every single villager must be thoroughly investigated, so before the thorough investigation, it might not be convenient to enter or exit." Both Shirley and Diao heard this, their faces showing unease. "What? Diao said in an urgent tone, but we have something very important. Diao then added, our parents are seriously ill, we have to leave urgently, please understand. Hearing this, the guard hesitated a bit, he said, this matter, everyone wait a moment. Then he ran back to talk to someone who seemed to have a higher position. Shirley watched the two people talking and couldn't help but feel worried. She told herself to calm down, she must calm down. After a while of talking, the guard returned to announce, Mrs., this is truly a difficult order to disobey. I'm sorry. However, I will take you to your workplace and prioritize your treatment first. Then I will arrange for a horse to take you there. Rest assured, I will absolutely not delay your work. Shirley forced a smile on her face and replied, I know, thank you, but in her mind she thought, calm down, if she refuses again, she will be suspected. Diao anxiously called out her sister's name, Sister Shirley. Before she could say anything, Shirley turned around and said in a determined voice, Diao, if you reveal your identity later and attract the attention of others, I will take the opportunity to escape with the children, understand? Diao hesitated at first, but then she had to compromise. I know, I have to learn to choose without hesitation. Shirley was led to the registration desk. The blue-haired security guard immediately comforted her, I've heard about your matter, don't worry, I'll take care of it quickly. Shirley immediately replied, thank you. The green-haired girl asked again, what is your name? Shirley immediately replied, Tuet La Shirley, Tuet in Snow White, Luong Gorgeous. The guard girl listened and took notes. She exclaimed, what a nice name, do you know how to read? Shirley replied, I had the chance to learn when I was young. Finally, the girl asked if she could take off her hat, we had something to confirm. Hearing this, Shirley couldn't help but tremble a little, but she still agreed. She raised her hand and slowly removed the scarf on her head, thinking to herself, it seems like it's over. Her beast ears appeared, the people below were all surprised and exclaimed, she's a beast, no wonder she ran to us at such a young age. Diao silently called out in his mind, Sister Shirley, then bent down to tell the two younger siblings, preparing to run. But something unexpected happened. After seeing Shirley's true identity, the female guard smiled and said, it turns out that Miss Shirley is a horse. Her hair color and name are both very beautiful. The people who heard what Shirley said couldn't help but be surprised. The security guard continued to give the paper she had just written to Shirley and instructed her that this was her ID, remember to keep it for later when exchanging for hard documents. Shirley picked up the paper, still surprised. She asked doubtfully, wait, everyone, aren't you going to arrest me? Seeing her ask that, the female guard immediately rolled up her sleeves to reveal a patch of blue skin. She reassured, Miss Shirley, calm down, I know what you are worried about. I am also a beastman, rest assured, the new king is wise, His Majesty Luong has given orders, prohibiting the existence of any form of slavery. There is none now, and there will be none in the future. Hearing that, Shirley couldn't help but be surprised, so she asked again to confirm, that is, we beastmen. The blue-haired girl smiled and said, that's right, we beastmen can live freely. Hearing this, both Shirley and Diao, who were planning to lead their two younger siblings away, stopped. The girl suddenly handed Shirley a piece of paper and continued, oh right, Miss Shirley said she used to go to school. This is a royal exam, if Miss Shirley is interested, you can consider participating. Hearing that, Shirley awkwardly reached out to take the paper and replied, oh, thanks. After finishing, she walked back to her younger siblings. Diao saw her sister leaving and immediately raised her hand to ask quietly, Sister Shirley, what's going on? Shirley looked like she still couldn't believe what had just happened and replied, I don't know either, but it seems like we don't need to hide anymore. Hearing that, all three of them jumped up and couldn't hide their happiness as they cheered, really, that's great. Shirley looked at the paper in her hand and thought to herself, the new king is wise and takes exams. Suddenly she called out, Guofeng, prepare to go to Chang'an City for a trip. Diao was still holding his little brother Haiin in his arms when he heard what his sister said, and immediately looked back at her with a suspicious expression. Shirley clasped her hands together in a prayer gesture, her eyes shining with hope as she spoke, not knowing why, she suddenly wanted to see it with her own eyes. Late at night, a group of guards and soldiers of the religion rushed into the Duke's mansion with torches. Then they banged on the door and shouted, open the door quickly. Duke Willer and two guards followed behind, opened the door and stepped out to greet them, their faces filled with confusion, not understanding what was going on. Duke Willer said sternly, what are you doing here? The orange-haired man leading the group quickly raised his hand to signal everyone to stop, while holding a torch in his other hand. He spoke loudly, recently there has been a constant spread of superstitions, spreading news that is unfavorable to the true master. Someone has reported that those superstitions are in the mansion. Having said that, he assumed he had authority and ordered the soldiers standing behind him to search me. Duke Willer saw that these soldiers were too rude and disrespectful, no longer knowing their place, so he angrily shouted and was insolent. Duke Willer was furious, his blood boiling, his left hand on the scepter, his right hand behind his back, his legs spread shoulder-width apart, his head held high, displaying his authority in front of them. He continued, our Willer-Upson family has been loyal servants to the Yadian kingdom for generations. It's not like we can just rely on your mouths to talk nonsense without evidence to slander you. Duke Willer's eyes were cold as he continued, just like what the world said, the gods of the main religion had lost the light of their true master, obscuring right and wrong. To those who they did not like, they all said they were superstitious. The soldiers and guards stopped and stood still, dumbfounded. Duke Willer's words just now made him think. Ever since the Queen disappeared, there had been a hidden force opposing the Pope, but it had never been found. The Archbishop suspected that the Duke was protecting the Queen the most, but still could not find any evidence. Suddenly he gritted his teeth, frowned, his eyes sharp, thinking back to the order the Archbishop gave him to come here and the words Duke Willer had just said. He felt very awkward. This time, he only wanted to go to the door to see if he could find it. It was just that the situation was like this. If he rushed in, tomorrow the Duke's words would spread throughout the streets and alleys. It was disadvantageous to the Archbishop's current situation. Then suddenly he placed his hand on his chest, took a step forward with his right foot, bowed his head and respectfully admitted his mistake, Your Excellency. I'm sorry, recently, there have been rumors everywhere in the city, we were just concerned about the chaos, I hope you will forgive our offense. It seems that this orange-haired guard is also thoughtful. Hearing that, Duke Willer calmed down and forgave him. He just explained the misunderstanding and hoped everyone would catch that person soon. Then everything ended peacefully. The orange-haired guard thanked him again, thanked the Duke for understanding, and prayed that the divine light would protect him. Then they led their troops away. Duke Willer hurriedly instructed his subordinates, telling them to act carefully, before Her Majesty the Queen returns, they must. Duke Willer had not finished his sentence when suddenly from afar there was the sound of clapping. In the darkness, a man in a black cloak walked by clapping his hands and saying loudly, Well done. Duke Willer suddenly started, turned back and said, panicked, Who? The two people in cloaks took off their hoods, and it turned out to be Queen Timothy and Count Robin. The two of them greeted Duke Willer, Duke, long time no see. Duke. Duke Willer asked suddenly, Her Majesty, Robin, he continued happily, everyone is back. Having said that, the three of them went into the room and sat down to chat. Queen Timothy sat on the chair and said gratefully, Your Excellency, this month has been hard for everyone. Duke Willer also replied with a sulky expression, It's been hard too. In the future, Your Majesty, please stop torturing my old bones. Queen Timothy smiled and asked Duke Willer about the current situation in the country. Although the domestic news had never stopped, I had also obtained a lot of intelligence from His Majesty Luong. But I still wanted to hear the Duke speak in detail. Duke Willer recounted the current situation with a serious expression. Your Majesty must also know that after she left, because of the cancellation of the tax exemption policy, the people quickly became dissatisfied. But at first, the people did not want to directly conflict with the gods, but hoped that we officials would convey our requests to the gods. Of course, we followed her instructions and let the officials help us out, but our attitude was very soft. The people from the main sect thought that we were afraid of them, so they became even more arrogant. Naturally, people came up with the notion that it wasn't that the officials didn't help, but that the religious leader was being too arrogant. They also realized that the religious leader wouldn't agree to their request. At this time, we sent someone to deliver a message that at first, His Majesty wanted to reduce taxes for the good of the people, but was finally forced by the people of the main religion to flee abroad. The people began to believe that the new emperor was truly thinking of them, and began to look forward to his return. Under our leadership, many people joined the anti-cult organization to protect the Queen. After speaking about the situation of the country, Willer put his hand on his chest and bowed his head to ask King Timothy. Now, if he just showed up to cheer up the army, many people would support him. King Timothy was delighted and praised Duke Willer for doing a good job. His Majesty Luong told me to win people's hearts after returning to Yadian. Unexpectedly, he helped me do it. Duke Willer humbly replied, It's all for our Yadian. King Timothy replied, Well, so, things can't be delayed, let's quickly start the second step of the plan. Her eyes were cold as she continued, overthrowing the sect leader. Willer Formula heard the king's words, he was shocked and panicked, trying to advise, Your Majesty, aren't you being too hasty? Although many people expressed their support for you, they were all for their own benefit, not truly loyal to you. He frowned and continued, If forced, the people of the cult would willingly give up the benefits, the people would very likely betray him. Even if the people did not betray, the army was still in the hands of the priest. If he orders the army back, our ragtag grassroots organizations will be completely unable to cope. King Timothy looked straight into Duke Willer's eyes and smiled, as if she had already calculated everything. She replied, There's no need to worry about these things. Someone will teach us what to do. Duke Willer looked at His Majesty with a heart full of doubt and confusion. Suddenly two figures appeared outside the door. Queen Timothy spoke and said, Come in. Two young men walked in, their faces quite bright and radiant, introducing themselves. Hello, we are the envoys of the Han Dynasty, Fuzi and Taki. Duke Willer opened his arms warmly in welcome. Welcome. He went straight to the main point and asked the two people in front of him, not knowing how to specifically carry out the overthrow of the Pope. Fuzi's eyes lit up and he said resolutely, "Fight the landlord." Early the next morning, in the cathedral city, crowds of people gathered in the streets to protest. They shouted, "The priest oppresses the people. Enslaves the people. We, Yadian, do not need the priest." They were heading towards the city of the cult leader, led by Queen Timothy. She raised her hand and gave the order to everyone, "Charge with me. Overthrow the cult leader, build a new Yadian." The people and soldiers behind also shouted, "Overthrow the cult leader, build a new Yadian." At this time, in the city of the holy cult, several guards heard the sound of people protesting. They were confused and didn't understand what was going on. They looked at each other and asked, "What's that noise outside?" The guard next to them replied, "Let's see." Suddenly, the army led by King Timothy burst in. The soldiers of the Pope were terrified. The people rushed in and saw the people in the main temple. Their faces were fierce and angry, shouting loudly. They were the ones who forced us to die, and they were overthrown. The soldiers of the patriarch stood there, trembling and shouting. "What are you doing?" The army ignored them and continued to charge forward. They shouted and charged. At this moment, they were all crying out for help. "Who are you? Where are you?" Ah. King Timothy's army attacked quite suddenly, leaving the people of the god-called leader unable to react. The battle ended. King Timothy's men captured the religious leaders and escorted them to the city square. King Timothy and Count Robin stood in the square and spoke a few words to the people. Count Robin spoke of the crimes of the Catholics. Priest Ao, during his time as a priest, used the name of a true priest to seize land from the people and forced believers to give him their property. After the believer refused, it was considered superstitious, and in the end, it caused people to lose their homes. The special priest, during his time as the priest, used the name of the nation, citing the divine decree of the true master, to raise the tax rate of the people. Then Count Robin convicted the above cardinal. Before he could finish his sentence, the angry faces of the people below raised their hands and shook the cult leaders. They spoke in unison, "They deserve to die, kill them." Seeing this, Queen Timothy spoke up to reassure the people, "Don't worry. The crimes of these people are enough to make them die 1,000 times over. After we overthrow the main cult, I will, in the name of the Queen, give these people the death penalty." Hearing these words from the king, everyone felt relieved, and said in unison, "Thank you, Your Majesty, thank you." King Timothy continued, "In addition, I have an important policy to announce." She spread her powerful arms and said, "The territories the church occupied, although nationalized, would all be divided among those who had no land. Regardless of whether the land was allotted or not, the first 3 years would be tax-free." When the people heard this, they were all stunned, their eyes sparkling and their mouths smiling, expressing their happiness. Then they exclaimed and asked the queen, "Really, really?" King Timothy shone brightly under the sunlight, and replied loudly, "Of course it was true. I, Timothy, am the king of Yadian, and my words are royal orders. I don't joke around." After hearing this, the people raised their hands with happy faces and shouted, "Long live the queen." Everything was arranged. At this time, in the Willer mansion, Fuzi and Willer were standing in front of the door discussing with each other. Fuzi said, "This is the whole process of fighting the landlords, through the interests of the land, tying up the people, making the people submit to the queen." Willer Formula looked admiring and exclaimed, "Such a beneficial strategy for the people. Your Majesty truly has great willpower." Fuzi put his hand on his chest, also admiring Timothy's qualities. "Her Majesty the Queen of your country listened to me. Being able to do things without hesitation, also very courageous. She is a blessing to the people of Yadian." Count Willer also expressed admiration for Fuzi, saying, "Lord Fuzi is so young and yet so cautious, as expected of someone entrusted with an important responsibility by His Majesty the Han Dynasty." Fuzi humbly replied, "Your Excellency, you flatter me." At this moment, Fuzi thought of Laner, the girl he had longed for all this time. Fuzi silently said to Laner in his heart, "Laner, see? My ability is recognized. Finally I have the right to bring you happiness, have the courage to propose to you." The two stood gazing at the vast sky. Duke Willer asked Fuzi, "My lord, what should we do next?" Fuzi replied, "Spread the news of Her Majesty the Queen's passing throughout Yadian." People in other cities of the Yadian kingdom spread the news of Queen Timothy's decrees. They gathered in groups and discussed with each other. One of them was still a bit surprised and asked, "Did the queen really divide the property and land taken from the church?" Another person who heard this still didn't quite believe it and said, "You're not lying to us, are you? What kind of noble is this good?" Hearing this, the man quickly raised both hands and said resolutely, "It's very true. My cousin personally experienced this. He purposely told me." Then this man showed absolute trust in the king. He continued, "Anyway, I have decided that when the queen comes to us, I will follow her to overthrow the cult." "What about you?" The people around seemed to be confused, not knowing whether to believe it or not. "Again, can we really divide the money and land?" Then someone said loudly, "We can't live any longer anyway. We have no money, we'll go." Everyone said in unison, "Me too. I'll go too. We'll go too." At this time in the capital cathedral, a subordinate panicked and ran to report to the Grand Patriarch. The Grand Patriarch was in trouble. Queen Timothy, who led the people to attack the church, had already taken over a large area. The people of other cities were also waiting for the queen to arrive. Some cities were affected by this and had organized their own attack groups to attack the church. This continued. The subordinate hesitated and did not dare to continue. The old sect leader was angry but still spoke calmly. At first, he saw that she was a woman and easy to control, so he pushed her to the top. "I didn't expect that I was wrong." The old sect master ordered his subordinate, giving instructions below. "Temporarily stop the war with the Han dynasty, tell the knight to quickly return to the country, and suppress Timothy." The subordinate placed his hand on his chest and replied in obedience. "Yes." A few days later, the border army heard that Queen Timothy was rebelling against the Pope and needed to call back the soldiers to protect the city. They were shocked and shouted, "What?" There was a riot in the country. The Pope was in danger. The leader then gave the order. "All troops prepare. Immediately prepare to return to Yadian. Suppress the queen and the heretics. Save the Grand Master." Hearing the order, the knights immediately set out and ran back to the cathedral. Suddenly the sky darkened. There was a strange noise above. They looked up at the sky. It was a heavy Han Dynasty aircraft dropping bombs on the ground. The subordinate shouted loudly. "Why at this time?" He shouted loudly. "It's the enemy attacking. Retreat first. Retreat quickly." Just finished speaking. Then the sound of bombs exploded. Smoke and fire everywhere. The old master of the capital cathedral was very anxious at this moment. He shouted loudly. What happened? Someone had been sent to inform him for 10 days. Why hasn't the knight returned yet? The subordinate reported the situation. It was said that the Han Dynasty soldiers launched an attack when they wanted to retreat. There was no way to escape. Only then did the old patriarch realize. His face darkened. His eyes were sharp. After Timothy disappeared, he was nowhere to be found. Surely he didn't go to the Han Dynasty? So now Han Dynasty attacked. In fact, they coordinated with Timothy, deliberately blocking the knights from coming back to rescue. The old minister bared his teeth. His eyes turned black. His 2 hands gripped the scepter tightly. He was angry and his blood boiled. He growled. Luong. Why are you everywhere? One day, I will kill you. The old priest ordered his subordinates. The order of the knights. Even if it meant death. They had to find a way to get back here. At Chang'an City train station. The train whistle sounded loudly. People were bustling about. People got off the train. Everyone was happy and excited. They had arrived at Chang'an City. A train has arrived at the station. The train attendant announced to everyone, "Thank you for experiencing the Chang'an City train. Welcome to come again next time." Suddenly the flight attendant noticed a little girl still sleeping. She didn't wake up even though they had arrived at the station. Immediately went to the girl's side. Called her up. "This young lady. We've arrived." The beast girl heard someone calling her. Her face was dazed. Her mouth was still drooling. Her eyes slowly opened. She made a confused sound. Then the girl quickly got off the train. Looking at the time. Couldn't help but exclaim. She really made it in time. She couldn't help but think. Before, she thought she wouldn't make it in time. The conversation she had with her sister yesterday flashed through her mind. Her sister asked her in disbelief. "Sister Shirley, can you really make it in time for the exam? That place is in the west." Shirley was extremely surprised and confused when she heard that. She didn't know what to do. Here. But then she went to ask the ticket seller. Then she heard them say, "Don't worry. Take the carriage to the city. There is a train. Then take the train. You will definitely make it in time." Her sister and she heard about the train and asked doubtfully, "What is a train?" The other person explained. "It is said to be an iron monster. It can eat people. It will be dragged to another place before being released. The two people were extremely frightened when they heard this. They didn't know what it was. Shaking off her train of thought, Shirley turned to the monster. It was also a train. She shouted, "Thank you. So awesome. Mr. Train. Thank you." The people around her were shocked to hear her shout, their eyes wide open in shock, not knowing why she did that. Shirley saw a shop selling fragrant food, so she went in to buy some to fill her stomach. After a while of waiting, the shop owner gave her a paper bag and said, "Please enjoy." Shirley took the steaming hot bun. Her mind was filled with doubts. Was this the steamed bun that was recommended? Then, she opened the bag, picked up a steaming hot bun, and brought it to her mouth to take a bite. A delicious warm liquid flowed into her mouth. The bun was filled with many flavors, the taste of the dough, the meat inside, and the sweet soup. Shirley raised her hand, covered her happy face, and couldn't help but exclaim, "So delicious." After enjoying it, Shirley didn't know what to do. "Let me see. Next." Then she walked around, suddenly realized she was lost. She cried silently in her heart. How should she go? Looking at the splendid street, there were many vehicles passing by, and there were also those green and red lights, but looking here, everywhere looked the same. Seeing Shirley so confused, two Chang'an city residents stopped by to ask, "Haha, is this your first time in this city?" Shirley cried sadly, I came to visit the contestant." Then Shirley scratched her head in embarrassment, but now she was a bit dazed, not knowing what to do. There were too many things she didn't know. Hearing this, the other two people enthusiastically introduced, "If so, do you need a Chang'an City travel guidebook? It comes with a map and a lot of information, only $1, a product of Qingting newspaper, not a fake." After saying that, the person took out a few books from somewhere, enthusiastically handed them to Shirley. The person next to her did not forget to add, "If you are illiterate, you can invite me to be your tour guide. I can take you around Chang'an City. 5 yuan a day, guaranteed not to lose, rest assured. I have a degree, not a bad person." Shirley heard that, very happy, shyly said, "Great, then please give me a notebook." After studying the book for a while, she opened the map, looked at the traffic lights and evaluated them. It turned out that these were green and red lights, things to control traffic. With this, can I coordinate traffic? How awesome. Shirley looked at the map and thought to herself, there's still time, let's walk around a bit more. Shirley read the information in the book. The main city area went through a long period of construction. Now the main city area has been completely completed. This place is not only the main residential area of the city residents, but also a large area of food, shopping, entertainment. Strongly recommended to go to the supermarket, buy gold coins, Drunken Tower to visit and shop. The port area close to the main city, is the largest cargo gathering area in Chang'an City, and is also the area for arranging traffic with the outside. The airport and railway station in Chang'an City are built here. Such a standard port area is also a unique part of the country. Shirley stood on high ground, looking at the sea, where ships and boats were coming and going busily. Shirley opened the book again and continued to read. The scenery at sunset was also very beautiful. One could also see the entire view of the tallest building in the main city area that was not yet completed. After shopping and entertaining in the main city area, she strongly recommended coming here to relax. Shirley then went to the industrial zone. In order to realize the ideal of a great power, His Majesty Luong deliberately planned a modernized steam engine factory, where there were many advanced machines, far beyond everyone's imagination. It was the foundation of the Han Dynasty's long-term development. Shirley went closer and saw a soldier standing guard. She quickly covered her face in embarrassment and ran out. Because according to what she read in the book, it was also reminded that unauthorized people were not allowed to enter, otherwise the consequences would be unpredictable. Shirley ran without forgetting to apologize. "Sorry, I took the wrong path." Behind her, the guard looked at Shirley with a puzzled expression. Shirley was sitting in a big car, touring the agricultural area. The agricultural area is food-oriented, for the planning of His Majesty Lu Feng's main city. Now Chang'an City's fields and gardens have the largest area, the most varieties, and the highest yield among all the cities. Shirley looked at the vast fields and exclaimed, "It's so big, how can I grow it all?" Chang'an City changed the style of the previous royal city. Not only did it not need other cities to provide food, on the contrary, the food it grew was enough to support the entire country. The Imperial District, the most central area of Chang'an City, is also where His Majesty Lu Feng lives. Right now, he is still staying in the former castle of Xi'an City. The areas several kilometers around are strictly forbidden to enter, and all the buildings within have been planned as office buildings for various departments. We understand you are keen to visit, but do not attempt to enter, or you will bear the consequences. After reading, Shirley wondered, is that Majesty inside? Shirley stroked her hair, hummed, and quickly went to her exam venue, which was the Grand Theater. It is known that the Grand Theater, a theater, was newly built by His Majesty Lu Feng, for exhibitions and performances, as well as for announcing important events to the public. This place was built very elaborately, because today was the registration day, so there were many people passing by. Shirley followed the instructions, went to a table, and said doubtfully, "Hello." The person sitting at the table asked friendly, "May I ask what's the matter?" Shirley said the purpose of her coming here today, "I want to take the exam, register here, right?" The person opposite nodded, "Yes, do you have your ID?" Shirley hurriedly fumbled in her pocket, took out a piece of paper, and handed it to the person in front. "This one?" The other person said, "Yes, but remember to change to a physical card on time next time." Shirley replied blankly, "Okay." The girl then took out a card with an information sheet, her face beaming. She handed it to Shirley. This was her exam card, the morning before yesterday. Remember to come to the exam on time. Then she gave further instructions. In addition, for candidates from other cities coming here to take the exam, they could use the exam card, go to the designated hotel. Shirley was happy, her face flushed, happily asked, "Really?" Following the directions on the paper, Shirley went to the hotel. As soon as she entered the room, she jumped onto the bed and rolled around. Lying on the soft bed, she couldn't help but sigh, "I'm so tired today, the bed is so soft, so comfortable." Then she opened the door, looked at Chang'an City from above, and suddenly exclaimed, "Wow, so amazing, Chang'an City." Before Shirley's eyes were houses completely covered in white, with yellow roofs, and people walking busily below. Looking at the development of Chang'an City, she thought, it was clearly late and yet so bustling, and there were also many beastmen. Diao's group definitely likes this city too. Then Shirley turned around, showing her determination. Okay, she must pass the exam, stay in this city, and then pick up Diao's group. She couldn't help but hope in her mind, and she also didn't know if she would be able to see His Majesty if she passed the exam. She was very curious, wondering what kind of person Luong was that could create such a city. Early in the morning, in a certain room, on a large bed, Luong was in a deep sleep. Then Ellie came in from outside and came to Lufeng's bed. Ellie pushed Luong and said gently, "Young master, wake up, it's morning." Luong opened his eyes in a daze, still not fully awake, looking in front of his bed. Ellie." Having said that, before Ellie could react, he hugged Ellie's waist, pulling her whole body into his arms, his voice sleepy, and slept for another 5 minutes. Ellie was extremely surprised when Luong hugged her, and screamed. "Ah!" After coming to her senses, Ellie blushed and quickly pushed Luong away from her. With difficulty, she said, "No, there's something important to do today." "Wake up!" Luong was still sleepy and was pushed away by Ellie. He made an sound. Lufeng's face was distorted by Ellie's push, revealing a look of resignation. Suddenly, Lufeng's eyes opened wide, as if remembering something, his whole body became alert, and he said, "That's right, today is the exam day." Ellie became more shy and embarrassed and continued to speak, "So, can you wake up, and also, can you stop touching my tail?" At the exam hall, everyone was present. In the yard, tables and chairs were arranged neatly in rows, each person sat at a table. The atmosphere was extremely tense and pressured. Shirley sat on her desk, her whole body tense, looking at the people around her, unable to help but feel pressured. Too many people, so many people, can she pass the exam? Suddenly, she heard her friends talking to each other. One asked, "Do you know about the bandit incident from before?" The other replied, "Because of that, His Majesty did not trust the nobles, so he organized an examination, preparing to select outside personnel to use. Moreover, I heard that after that, every year it was the same." One person said, "That is, as long as we can pass, we can become nobles." The other person saw that the person who just spoke did not understand and scolded, "Idiot, now we are not called nobles anymore, we are civil servants." Shirley on this side heard this and her expression was a bit sad, thinking in her head, so this kind of thing happened. From the podium, an old man walked up, holding a loudspeaker and shouting, silently. Although the old man was old, his voice was extremely powerful. Hearing this, everyone below was startled, and looked towards the old man. The old man held the loudspeaker and introduced to the contestants, "I am the person in charge, the first national competition of Han Dynasty, buff of Chang'an City, here to supervise everyone." From outside, the guards entered, standing on all four sides around the room. The leader introduced, "We are the supervisors, will strictly observe everyone." Mr. Buff informed everyone about the exam room regulations and exam time. The guards distributed the exam papers and introduced the exam to everyone. The exam time was 2 hours, the exam papers were placed in front of everyone. After the bell rang, they could start doing the exam otherwise. As soon as Mr. Buff finished speaking, a person who had not yet arrived for the exam looked at the test paper and was shot in the hand by the supervisor above. Mr. Buff continued, "Number 9527 opened the exam first, violated the rules, and was disqualified." The person who just opened the exam paper was trembling with fear, his face pale. He quickly made an excuse. I just opened it to confirm for a moment, I didn't look." Mr. Buff did not listen to those excuses, pointed at his face and shouted. "In the exam room, any behavior, violating the rules, is not allowed. Go out, come again next year. That person still does not rush to beg, give me another chance to go, but was forcibly dragged out by the guard. After the guy was dragged out, the exam hall fell silent again. Mr. Buff continued, during the exam, no looking around, no whispering. Otherwise, it will be considered cheating, and the cheater will be disqualified from the exam. Do you understand? The candidates below saw that the exam was so strict, so they were extremely worried, but there was nothing they could do, so they said in unison, understood. Mr. Buff saw that everyone was so down and in low spirits, so he raised his voice and shouted, no spirit, do you hear that? Is this the voice you want to contribute to His Majesty? Witnessing all this, Luong and his group stood on the high wall, using binoculars to look down and observe the contestants. Luong asked curiously, what infected Buff? Ellie, who was using binoculars to the side, shook her head and replied, I don't know, and below, the contestants shouted in unison, I understand. The sound this time had much more volume and momentum than before. Mr. Buff heard this, finally satisfied, smiled and said, good, very spirited, let's start the competition. 15 minutes later, the candidates below were all confused. What question was this? This word, I don't know, this word, I. Above, Luong and the others were holding binoculars, observing every move of the contestants. Ellie said in disappointment, these contestants are too bad. Mina looked at one person, said, he looked at the other person, the paper was basically blank. Nicole saw that someone was injured, couldn't help but worry, oh dear, he's vomiting blood, is he okay? Ellie was worried, turned to the side and asked Luong, young master, the level of these candidates is a bit, this time it is definitely not us, what a waste. Luong was still using binoculars, smiled as if nothing happened, replied, is that so? I don't feel that way. In Luong's binoculars, the beastman Shirley was concentrating on her homework, looking serious, and she had written a lot of papers. A gong sounded, followed by a voice saying, time's up, everyone immediately stopped writing. Shirley also stopped writing, tiredly wiping the sweat from her forehead, breathing heavily. The others were so exhausted that they even collapsed, vomiting blood. Suddenly Shirley felt something was wrong, strange, always feeling like there was someone looking at her. Oh. Shirley looked towards that gaze, she saw 4 people on the high platform, 2 beastmen and 2 humans. Suddenly the boy inside looked at her and smiled. Shirley saw that handsome face staring at her and blushed with embarrassment. At night, in Chang'an City, the moonlight shines everywhere, on all the buildings and streets. At Luong's castle, a voice rang out, young master, the competition results are all here. In the room, 4 people Luong, Ellie, Mina and Nicole were sitting together. Each person held a set of test papers to grade. Ellie said excitedly, hoping that there would be a few good candidates. Luong also hoped so, and distributed the test papers to everyone, so that everyone could look at them together. After a while of grading, Mina was no longer in the mood. Looking at a pile of papers, all with 1, 2, 3, and no high scores. She immediately asked Luong, young master, our total score is 10 stars. Ellie angrily said, we don't even have a qualified score, are these people wasting my money? Nicole hurriedly advised and soothed Ellie, okay, it was the first time anyway. Luong's side is better, Luong told everyone, his side has a few people and it's fine. Ellie was curious, leaned over to look, If you don't look, then just look, even Ellie is startled, her eyes wide open, really, 1 elf, 3 commoners, all with scores above 60. Luong flipped to another test paper, Ellie shouted, wow, there's someone who got 80. At Luong's castle, Shirley and 2 others were waiting outside the room, preparing to meet Luong. Shirley was very confused, not knowing what to do. Why, she clearly only wanted to pass the exam and stay in this city to work. Why did she have to meet His Majesty in person now? What if she said something wrong? What if His Majesty was unhappy? But, hearing that His Majesty was very gentle, there was no need to worry about these things. While thinking, Shirley calmed herself down, breathing in and out to keep herself from worrying and being afraid. She looked to the side, looking at the 2 people talking to each other. One of the elf girls covered her face and said, Your Majesty is really handsome. The girl next to her also agreed, that's right, he's very majestic. The first time I looked straight at him, I almost didn't dare to breathe, the elf girl continued, that's so exaggerated, Your Majesty is very gentle. The girl explained that no matter how gentle she was, he was still the king of a country. If he was uncomfortable with anything, his life would be over. Hearing this, Shirley was startled, her eyes widened, her face turned pale, and she sat still without moving. Shirley was sure in her heart, that was true, perhaps Luong was that kind of person. The 2 girls beside her saw that Shirley was not well, so they asked, Miss, are you okay? Shirley was trembling all over, but she still forced a smile and replied, no, it's okay. The other 2 saw her shaking like that and her crooked smile, and laughed doubtfully, really? Suddenly Nicole stepped out and said, next person, Miss Shirley. Shirley was startled, so soon, it was her turn. Shirley quickly stood up and said yes. Just stood up, not even a few steps, then Shirley tripped and fell forward. Wow. Everyone around hurriedly asked, is everything okay? Inside Lu Feng's study, Shirley sat opposite Lu Feng, her head bowed to the ground, not daring to look up. Miss Shirley, Lu Feng asked. Shirley timidly replied, yes. Lu Feng held Shirley's test paper and continued. Her test results this time were very good, she had read books before. Shirley was timid and quickly replied, yes. Lu Feng asked again, where did you live before? I saw you in Tieshi City, you must not be a local. Shirley trembled, her voice stuttering, yes, that's right, I was a person from the Beast Kingdom before. Pausing for a moment, Shirley clenched her trembling hands and continued, my parents were nobles before. Oh no, the nobles before were my parents, that's not right. Shirley's entire body tensed up and she kept scolding herself in her mind, what am I saying? Just as Shirley was about to faint from nervousness, she suddenly heard Lu Feng's voice from the front. It's okay. Shirley raised her head in a daze. Oh. Then he listened to Lu Feng continue, don't be nervous, we still have a lot of time, let's talk slowly. Shirley heard these warm words, her face flushed, okay. She looked at Lu Feng, realizing, oh, the person from yesterday, so he is His Majesty. After a while of talking, Lu Feng had grasped Shirley's basic situation. Lu Feng said, it turned out that she was a noble of the Beast Kingdom before, no wonder she had more knowledge than others, and had seen and heard a lot. Shirley scratched her head and replied shyly, that year after leaving the Beast Kingdom, I went to many places. Hearing this, Lu Feng couldn't help but sigh, those years, the Beast Kingdom really had a hard time. Then Lu Feng said to Nicole, you've worked hard, Nicole, take Miss Shirley to rest for a while. Shirley was confused, not understanding what was going on, confused, oh. Then Nicole beside her said to her, Miss Shirley, let's go. When she stepped outside, she couldn't help but wonder, oh, so it's over. After Shirley went out, Lu Feng asked Mina and Ellie what they thought. Ellie said, well, how should I say it, although she is easily stressed, but she feels like a good child, comes from a rich family, has suffered a lot, has a lot of knowledge, but is not arrogant, I think it's very good. Mina is also very satisfied, your side collected the background, also did not see any problems, very good. Lu Feng heard and decided, okay, let her stay by Ellie's side to learn. After saying that, Lu Feng stamped the bottom of the resolution. Lu Feng then made himself a cup of coffee, holding the cup while asking Ellie. Ellie, you have someone select students who are close to being qualified. After training them, we can use them to build the future telegraph network. Ellie nodded and said, okay, then continued, but young master, even if you add those people, it won't be enough. Lu Feng nodded and continued, to complete the telegraph network, no matter how you streamline it, you'll need a team of several thousand people. Investing in so many knowledgeable people at this stage will only cost you more than it will gain. Therefore, he arranged telegraph stations in 5 major cities and several places in Haiin City, with this city as the center, and the cities below, using pigeons to deliver messages to these 5 major cities. Lu Feng then picked up the coffee and took a sip. Ellie's eyes lit up, excitedly saying, that is to say, the cities did not directly transmit the news to Chang'an City, but let the 5 major cities synthesize the news, and then transmit it, I understand. In the room Shirley was assigned, Shirley sat on a chair. Asked Nicole doubtfully, thank you, that. Nicole quickly said, call me Nicole. Shirley nodded, shyly replied, yes Miss Nicole. Shirley was confused and asked worriedly, was my performance not good? Nicole didn't know what Shirley meant, huh? Shirley continued, because it seemed like everyone else had already been assigned work, only me. Nicole felt that Shirley had misunderstood something, this. In her mind, Nicole thought, what to do, I can't tell her, it was to meet her that the young master prepared this interview. Suddenly Lu Feng appeared in the room, smiling and asking, what are you talking about? Nicole happily ran out, welcoming Lu Feng, Your Majesty, you've arrived. Shirley sitting on the side was also surprised by Lu Feng's appearance, and exclaimed in panic, Your Majesty. Lu Feng said to Shirley, Shirley, I'm going to arrange for you to come and learn from Ellie, are you willing? Shirley couldn't believe what she heard, and stammered, that means me. Then Shirley seemed to suddenly wake up, her eyes shining, her face flushed, she happily replied, yes, very satisfied. Outside there was a storm, the rain was getting heavier, a small boat was sailing in the middle of the vast ocean. Princess Field was standing on the edge of the ship, ignoring the storm and rain. Seeing this, her subordinate stood up in fear and advised her, Your Highness, we are about to enter the stormy sea. Princess Field only hummed and did not move. Having said that, Field looked into the distance, there were many boats there, his subordinates also looked, wondering, are those people still following? Princess Field just replied gently, they all want to share the soup. The subordinate continued, let me see, the Duke's fleet, quite a few people, yeah, the smallest powerful count also came to add to the excitement, there is also the merchant fleet, they really want money even if they don't care about their lives. Field did not stand there anymore, but turned around and went inside the boat, not forgetting to instruct his subordinates to follow him, who knows, maybe we can use it then. Then the captain gave the order, beat the flag, told the mermaid to get on the boat, we will enter the storm sea. The subordinates shouted in unison, yes. In Chang'an City, the Imperial District, the residence of His Majesty Luong, is the supreme center of the nation. Working here is going to be a kind of honor, becoming a member here is glorious, but at the same time the work here is also. As Shirley imagined, a bang on the table rang out, followed by an angry, vetoing voice. Lu Feng's face changed color, full of anger, pointing at the person opposite. Such a trashy plan, did he really seriously consider it? Every move here, every word and action affects millions of people, it's uncontrollable. Shirley imagined again, the person holding the document bowed his head, his whole body trembling, fearfully saying, sorry. Then Lu Feng continued with a sullen face, infiltrated, have you killed them all? Mina beside him said in a cold voice, her face ugly, yes, when dealing with enemies, we must pursue and kill them all. From the perspective of the country, this place cannot have the slightest hesitation, we must be firm and ruthless. Here, one must be careful and seriously discuss every national issue. Shirley's mind flashed back to the scene of Ellie holding the document, scolding herself, there's a problem with this data, check it again. And she stood opposite, unable to do anything but bow her head and refuse to give orders, yes, because any single detail could decide the future of the country. Shirley closed her eyes, I had originally guessed so. But the reality, it seemed different. In front of Shirley was the scene of Lu Feng and the other three people working together happily, not like what she thought. Mina said, has the new iron ore arrived yet? Ellie beside her was also very happy. Yes, it has entered the warehouse, the railway project went smoothly. Nicole agreed, that would be great. Shirley thought in disbelief, the railway project is an important project, but His Majesty said so. Is it okay to just say something nice normally? Moreover, should discussing these things be in such a relaxed atmosphere? No, could this be another test, but how can I pass it? Shirley hugged the documents, sitting huddled in her chair, her whole body immersed in her own thoughts. Lu Feng saw Shirley like that, so he asked, Shirley. Shirley was startled, snapped out of her thoughts, stood up, and replied, yes. Lu Feng saw that Shirley was unfamiliar, so he explained, we usually have meetings like this, relax, we are all our own people here, there is nothing to be nervous about. Shirley was startled, and replied in a fluster, yes, okay. Shirley suddenly noticed that in Lu Feng's words, His Majesty called her his own person. Thinking of this, Shirley was extremely happy, her face blushing. Then Shirley heard Lu Feng continue, okay, continue, now how is the main city plan? Shirley hurriedly searched through the documents she brought, after a while of searching, Shirley was happy, she found it. But Ellie said before, the basic design is completed according to Chang'an City's layout, the fastest progress now is the northern main city, if it is completely completed, it is estimated that it can be finished by autumn. There are some places in the city that have started producing the supplies we ordered before, but they have just started, the output is only about 20% of the plan. But I believe, waiting for the departments and structures to be fully prepared, it will be possible to reach 100%. While talking, Ellie ate cake, no need for any papers or documents. Shirley was stunned, so amazing, she had read the whole thing, but what was the output? Lu Feng asked again, so how is the development of the Yukam mountain range going? Ellie replied, it has already started, and believes that it will produce results very soon. Lu Feng nodded and replied, yes, the Yukam mountain range is our important mineral resource and chemical base, we must pay attention. Shirley heard Lu Feng ask another question, how is the situation with the ship, what about the armored boat? Ellie quickly replied, she had already asked the boat-building site to assign a few workers to come and study, the industrial park had also made arrangements, but considering the priority of the plan, they had not yet announced the start of work. Lu Feng nodded in satisfaction and replied, I'll leave this to you. Ellie continued to report, regarding weapons, the gun production line that His Majesty requested has been completed, the accompanying bullet production line has also started to be used but the capacity still cannot keep up, here are the relevant documents. After saying that, Ellie handed a set of documents to Lu Feng took the documents and said, there is no need to rush to start. Let people get familiar with the technology first, everything should be based on safety. Shirley, who was listening to the conversation from earlier, was already in a mess, dizzy, armored ships, chemical and mineral industries, guns, bullets, production lines, what was this? Seeing that Shirley was not feeling well, Nicole brought a cup of tea over and asked, what's wrong, Shirley? Shirley sadly replied, I'm so embarrassed because I keep hearing words I've never heard before and don't know what they mean. Lu Feng heard Shirley say that and said, if there is anything you don't know, you can ask. Ellie also happily patted her chest and confidently said, don't worry, I will wholeheartedly guide you. Shirley heard this and was no longer shy and raised her own questions. So, may I ask your Majesty, Miss Ellie, what does productivity mean? Ellie gave an explanation, this is, to put it simply, in a period of time, the standard finished product that the work area can produce, is also the quantity produced. Shirley doesn't understand, isn't the more the better? Ellie put her hands on her hips, analyzing what Shirley just said. So, if we produce too much and the people of the whole country can't buy it all, what will happen to our products, the products we stockpile? Shirley was speechless, not knowing how to answer this, then looked at Luong, sale price. Ellie continued, this is also a way, but treating the symptoms does not cure the root. Your Majesty, I'm also very curious. If according to our plan, the things we produce may really have to be stockpiled. What are your plans? Luong replied calmly, of course facing the sea, isn't there a new market? Luong propped his chin up, looked at Ellie and replied. Ellie asked in disbelief, His Majesty said for bro, but isn't that the country that is about to fight us? Shirley standing by also thought doubtfully, doing business with the enemy, what joke is this? Luong said, beat them up first, then do business. After Luong finished speaking, everyone in the room felt uneasy, as if he was saying it. Ellie also analyzed, for bro, if Milla's intelligence is not wrong, their market is indeed very valuable. Shirley on the other side still couldn't believe it, really thinking about selling things to the enemy. After the meeting was over, Ellie led Shirley out of the room. Shirley just left the room, as if a burden had been lifted and she breathed a sigh of relief. Ellie was holding a stack of documents, seeing this, she asked, what's wrong? Shirley was sad, lowered her head and spoke timidly, only feeling that everyone was so amazing, her thinking was completely impossible. Seeing this, Ellie encouraged Shirley, His Majesty is amazing. By his side, she will gradually discover that the world is very different. When she looks back, she will find that this process is unbelievable. Hearing Ellie say that, Shirley also has more confidence in herself, her face brightens, happily replying, yes, I will cherish it. Shirley couldn't help but think, she had to study seriously tonight. At Sunmakyu-Kam, a mining area, under a large mountain, workers are digging tunnels and mining minerals, and truckloads of dirt and rocks are being transported out. Suddenly a worker came out of the tunnel and called, Captain, we need you to come over here for a moment. The person outside nodded, then went inside, oh, wait for me. But not knowing that, not far from the two people's position, there was a dark figure hiding behind the bushes, eyes red as blood, those eyes looked angry. Suddenly the man's face changed color, he quickly shouted and pointed behind the person in front of him, be careful, Captain. The man named Captain was startled, his eyes wide, looking behind him. In Chang'an City, Lu Feng's mansion, an anxious voice rang out. What? The construction team was attacked? What are the casualties? Is there enough time for treatment? No treatment? Could it be that everyone is dead? Ellie was dumbfounded, looking at Luong who was talking too much, but not listening to what she said. She had to say it again, she said there were no casualties. At this moment, Ellie was extremely angry. If it weren't for Luong, she would have rushed forward and punched him in the face. Only then did Luong realize that he had overreacted. He trembled in fear and saw that Ellie was angry. Luong smiled, scratched his head, avoided Ellie's gaze, and said, what do you mean by attacking the construction team? Ellie no longer got angry, but opened the report and informed Luong that the beast had black limbs, a white body, black ears, and white eyes. Luong heard that and suddenly thought of something, isn't that Caesar's fellow clansman? At Lu Feng's feet was a small, cute and adorable panda, hugging Lu Feng's feet and sleeping. Luong asked more about the animal, and everyone caught it. Ellie was dumbfounded, caught it, but now it's in the square. Luong asked worriedly, what's the situation, if it's Caesar's fellow clansman, shouldn't he be sent to the Imperial Palace? Ellie couldn't help but think of the scene in front of the square this morning, everyone's eyes were shining like stars, showing their intense love for the panda. Ellie then explained, wasn't it because while escorting the panda, it made the people of Chang'an City curious. Everyone found it cute, wanted to surround me, wanted us to be a little late to bring it to you. Pausing for a moment, Ellie helplessly continued, tonight has been 3 days. Luong was also stunned, in his mind he couldn't help but think, should say, as expected of a national treasure's charm. Ellie was indignant and asked Luong in disbelief, she didn't understand, what was so cute about that guy. Then his expression changed, he drooled, and replied with a greedy expression, if it was delicious, I would find it cute. Luong looked at Ellie like that, tears streaming down his face, but he didn't say anything, almost forgetting, because he didn't understand the charm of a national treasure. Luong had been longing to see the national treasure for a long time, so he asked, where is that panda now, if there is no problem, he wouldn't mind raising another one. As Luong finished speaking, a cute panda walked in from outside. Ellie pointed to the door where the panda was, saying, hey, over here. Luong was very surprised to see the panda. And Caesar at Lu Feng's feet also looked out, looking at his fellow. The other panda was twice as big as Caesar. The two pandas looked at each other with deep affection. Suddenly Caesar jumped towards the panda, his mouth wide open, sharp fangs showing, his face showing a ferocious expression. When the panda saw Caesar doing that, it also bared its fangs and jumped towards him. Seeing this situation, Luong and Ellie shouted in fear. Don't fight," while Mina behind them stared at the scene that was about to unfold. Contrary to everyone's worries, the two pandas came close to each other, hugged each other, and cuddled each other like mother and child. Around the two pandas was a warm, pink atmosphere, extremely cute. Luong saw this and exclaimed, his face full of satisfaction. "Wow, so cute, so adorable." Ellie beside him breathed a sigh of relief. Luckily they weren't fighting, otherwise this place would be in chaos. Mina behind him felt embarrassed, not knowing what to say. 5 minutes later, papers and books were scattered all over the ground, everything was a mess. Luong, Mina and Ellie's faces all darkened. Luong couldn't believe what he saw, while Mina and Ellie's faces were gloomy and full of anger, wanting to eat the two pandas alive. But the two masterminds of everything were still playing together happily, and wherever they went, nothing was left intact. Luong turned pale, tiredly looking at the two pandas that were causing trouble. "Raising one is enough, I just came and asked if anyone wants to raise one, let them raise one." Ellie and Mina looked at Luong, then looked at each other and smiled wryly. Just now they said it was cute. Ellie said, "Then we have to fight to the death, or let people line up, one house per day, that way, everyone gets a share." Suddenly Luong had an idea, everyone has a share, now we can build a zoo. Ellie and Mina are suspicious, the zoo. Luong explained that it was a huge garden, raising many animals that they had seen before, or had never seen before. People only needed to pay the entrance fee to visit the animals. Mina and Ellie thought for a moment, the zoo was a food reserve. In their minds were delicious dishes made from those animals. Thinking of this, the two couldn't help but drool, their faces filled with happiness because they would be able to eat delicious food. Luong looked at the two visitors, feeling embarrassed and unable to say anything. Luong ordered, "Anyway, you just arrange it. Outside of Chang'an City, find a beautiful place with mountains and rivers, plan an area, and then send people to find all kinds of wild animals. They can fly in the sky, walk on the ground, or swim in the water." Ellie happily nodded, yes, then quickly went to work. At the Ali Kingdom Royal Palace. The king sat on high, doubtfully asking his courtiers, had the amount of iron ore needed by the Han dynasty increased again? His subordinates kneeling below hurriedly reported, yes, the contact person also said, next time there will be more. The king's face was solemn, and he couldn't help but think, although Ali's iron ore could currently meet the Han dynasty's needs. But if they continued to cooperate, the iron ore would eventually run out. At that time, the benefits would flow to other countries with iron ore. The best way was to take advantage of the good cooperation with Luong now, borrow his resources, and find another path of development. The king ordered, "Call Duke Dix here." The subordinate bowed, nodded, respectfully said, "Yes," then went out to work. In the telegram, a voice came out, "Your Majesty, I disagree." The Duke continued, "Ali has a family rule, no trading with foreigners. Your Majesty violated it, but now you still want to use iron ore as payment for learning new science and technology. Do you want to ignore the family rule?" The king explained above that the Han dynasty's techniques and tools are now more advanced than ours. If we cling to iron ore, and other countries learn new techniques from the Han dynasty, then one day, we will become a country that only has iron ore left, abandoned by the times. Duke said angrily, "We don't have to rely on Han dynasty, we also have our own way to develop." The king heard that the Duke was still stubborn, so he shouted angrily. To put it simply, he did not know how terrifying the science and technology of the Han dynasty was. Duke still won't listen, in fact, His Majesty is looking for an excuse, for going against the family teachings, right? The king could not speak to him anymore, angrily said, "Sir." Then turning to Duke Dix, "Do you think so too?" Duke Dix hurriedly eased the tension between the two. Duke Dix pulled Duke and said, "Why don't you and I go to Chang'an City to take a look?" The Duke stood beside him, looking at Duke Dix in surprise. Duke Dix continued, "The 1,000-year-old teachings of the Ali nation, if we only rely on His Majesty's words, we will not agree to change them. But if the Han dynasty is really like His Majesty said, as long as it is good for the Ali country, anything can be negotiated." The king nodded, "This is a good idea, you guys go, you will definitely change your mind." Duke looked angry, turned to Duke Dix and shouted, "Why did you agree to replace me? I will go, I will not change my mind." The king laughed loudly, "If you two have decided, then this time go to Chang'an City, take a spaceship, I will help you two ask for a spaceship." The two dukes were surprised, "A spaceship? What is that?" 3 days later, the sound of engines and propellers was heard, the surrounding wind rose, the surrounding tree branches flew with the wind. The two dukes and Dix had surprised faces, their hair flying behind them. The two dukes raised their heads and looked at the strange thing in the sky. It was a shuttle-shaped ship, floating in the sky. Duke shouted, "Unbelievable, this is a spaceship, can humans create something so big?" Suddenly the king stood behind, looking at the two people so surprised, laughed loudly, put his hands on the shoulders of the two dukes, and urged, "Go, this will be an unforgettable journey of a lifetime." The airship floated in the blue sky. Noble Dick stood on the deck looking at the scenery from above and kept sighing. Really flying in the air, what a formidable technique. Duke, do you think so? After Mr. Dix finished asking, he turned to his companion sitting on the spaceship seat and saw that he was trembling nonstop, holding his head and shaking all over, muttering, "Let me down, let me down." It turned out that Mr. Duke had a fear of heights. After a long time, the spaceship finally landed on the ground. Mr. Dix patted the back of his still exhausted friend beside him to comfort him. Okay, it's here." Hearing this, the Duke's spirit immediately rose. He looked ahead, a scene of massive buildings appeared that made him exclaim in surprise. "This is Chang'an City?" The two people from where the spaceship landed walked down the street. While others walked on the sidewalk, the two of them stood leisurely in the street. Mr. Dix said, "That was just the way it was." A car came from behind and saw two people blocking the road and shouted, "Do you respect traffic laws?" The two turned back to look. Mr. Duke couldn't help but ask Mr. Dix in shock, What is this? A car? Can a car go that fast?" But before Lord Dix could react, a cyclist came rushing past from the other side. The noble Duke looked more and more curious. "This is also a car? Two wheels. How can it balance? Moreover, the way this wheel is made, it's too delicate." The two continued walking. The noble Duke saw new things for the first time and kept stopping here and there. He was as excited as a child. In no time, his hands were filled with all kinds of things. He exclaimed, just like His Majesty Robinson said, Han Dynasty was indeed a good place. Mr. Dix followed behind. He was now exhausted, holding a towel to wipe away the sweat that poured down like rain. His face had a bit of regret as he thought, he had been convinced so quickly. He asked, "So now you don't object to His Majesty going against the family teachings anymore?" Hearing this, the Duke nobles immediately turned around and expressed their thoughts. The elders decided to set ancestral rules. In fact, they did not want iron ore to fall into the hands of other countries, allowing other countries to become powerful and then bully us. But now, with the rise of the Han Dynasty, iron ore was already a scarce resource. There was no point in holding out any longer. Now we have to think, what technical items of Han Dynasty can we learn to better develop Ali country? A noise interrupted the conversation. Mr. Duke pricked up his ears to listen. He asked the noble Dix, "Did he hear anything?" Mr. Dix pointed forward and said, "Heard." It got louder and louder. "Look ahead." A man was holding a red flag, blowing a whistle as if giving orders to something. The two nobles glanced over and a long train passed by. The two men's faces immediately changed color. Mr. Duke stammered, This is also a car?" The train passed by the two of them and reached the last carriage. Mr. Duke asked again, "Did you see?" Just now the carriage was full of goods. Each carriage I guess weighed 30 tons. Just now there were more than 10 carriages. This is the weight of the carriage. Speaking of this, Mr. Duke did not think any further. He raised his hand, his eyes filled with passion. He had decided that the future direction of Ali's development would be transportation. This must be present in Ali. Perhaps this was also Mr. Dix's common thought, so he happily and resolutely said, "Let's go see His Majesty the Han Dynasty." At the gate of Lu Feng's palace, a loud voice rang out, "What? His Majesty Lu Feng is not receiving guests?" The doorman immediately replied, "Yes, all guests who want to see His Majesty must go through the Consulate's review. Only important guests will His Majesty personally receive them." Inside the Imperial study, Lu Feng raised his cup of tea, sipping it while talking, "So comfortable, this is the life a king should have." Before meeting people every day was exhausting. Seeing that he seemed to be at ease, Ellie turned to glance at him. He was relieved, but I was not relieved at all. "When will you share my work?" Ellie couldn't help but feel a little angry after saying that. Lu Feng saw this and scratched his head, saying, Almost. Returning to the two nobles of the Ali kingdom, the Duke could not help but angrily say, "How can this be reasonable, rejecting a Duke like me outside the door? Does this Han Dynasty Majesty know the rules?" Duke Dix standing next to him smiled wryly and spoke up to mediate, "Let's go to the consulate first. If the other party really has no sincerity, we don't need to waste time." He said, then pointed forward to confirm, "Is it the one in front?" At the consulate, the orange-haired staff member was already waiting. She smiled professionally and pointed inward, saying, "Are you two foreign guests? This way, please." Duke saw her and asked suspiciously, "Are you the one who came to see us instead of Your Majesty?" The girl still maintained a smile on her lips and continued to explain, "Two distinguished guests, I am just the receptionist responsible for recording your basic information. After entering the basic information, we will distribute it to the diplomatic side to receive you based on the purpose of your visit." Hearing this, the two people turned to look at each other. Seeing that they seemed to accept it, the staff member continued speaking, "Then, dear guests, can you cooperate with us to record basic information? Rest assured, only the consulate and His Majesty will know about your news." The two of them sat down to get information, the Duke said, then the question. The waitress asked, "May I ask you, which country are you from, what are your names, and why did you come to Chang'an City to see His Majesty?" The Duke answered each question one by one. "We are from Ali country, I am the Duke, he is the Duke Dix, this time we came to trade with His Majesty for iron ore." Perhaps realizing that this was an iron ore trading cooperation, the employee immediately explained, "So it's you two, welcome, welcome, your list is already in our warehouse. We've been waiting for you two to come, but the matter you two want to discuss is related to the country, our consulate has no authority to handle it, we will report it to His Majesty. Let His Majesty personally handle it. I hope you two can stay for 2 more days, of course, we will provide accommodation for guests, including 3 meals a day, if you two don't mind, you can stay." In front of the hotel, Duke Dix stopped and asked Duke why he had refused to stay just now. The Duke folded his arms across his chest, not answering Duke Dix's previous question, but instead asking him back, "What do you think of the consulate's actions?" Duke Dix raised his hand to stroke his beard, his expression seemed satisfied as he expressed his opinion. The benefits were great. First was the reception system, depending on the person and the importance of the matter, would let different people receive the reception, to avoid wasting manpower. Next, there is a preliminary selection of consulates, which can also ensure the safety of the Han Dynasty. After returning, we can suggest that His Majesty Robinson build one. Mr. Duke seemed to agree, "I think so too." Mr. Dix was still curious about what was going on, but what did this have to do with his refusal to stay there? Hearing that, the Duke smiled mysteriously and replied, "I just thought, we only need to look at the consulate's system to know how they do things. So, the train doesn't need the Han Dynasty to provide the technology, we can get it through our own way." This answer made Duke Dix a little confused. What he meant was, the Duke raised a finger and explained, "Just need to find someone familiar with Chang'an City, and can be trusted. Think of a way to master these techniques and bring them back to Ali country, then maybe without wasting time, can also become strong." The two were talking. A few meters away, Muller suddenly discovered the two. He asked, Duke Dix, "When did you all come to Chang'an City?" Duke Dix saw that Muller was thinking about the plan again, so he stepped forward and put his arm around his shoulder to assign him the task. "Muller, you came at the right time, we have an important task for you." After listening to the two people talking about the mission, Muller seemed to disagree. This is not very good. Seeing Muller's attitude, Duke couldn't help but get angry and shout, "What's wrong? I told you to do it, you just do it. Do you still want to disobey orders?" Muller hurriedly clasped his hands and bowed, his face resigned as he said, "I dare not." Duke Dix saw this and put his hand on Muller's shoulder to encourage him. "Muller, recruiting those technical talents is a good thing for the country. By then, after the Ali country becomes a truly powerful nation, he won't need to go far to Chang'an City to deliver the iron ore to them. On the contrary, they will beg us, will chase us to your door to please you, just so you can give them the iron ore." Hearing Duke Dix's sweet words, Muller was a little moved, but in the end he put on a determined face and accepted. "Okay, I'll go." Seeing this, Duke Dix raised 2 fingers in a triumphant gesture. Late afternoon, at the aircraft manufacturing factory, everyone had finished work and was preparing to go home. The Yak aviation technician was walking and yawning when he heard a call. "Isn't this Yak?" Hearing Yak's voice, he looked up to see who was calling. "Mr. Muller." Muller raised his hand and smiled from inside the carriage. "You're off work already?" "It's just on the way, I'll see you off." Seeing that, Yak also found it inconvenient to refuse him, so he replied, "Then I'll bother Mr. Muller." In the car, Muller looked at Yak with concern. "Yak, you look like you're not in a good mood lately, did something happen?" Suddenly asked, Yak couldn't help but be a little startled, then waved his hand and forced a smile, saying, "It's nothing." Muller continued his plan to entice people. He continued to invite. Today, Tai Tu Lao seemed to have a new dish, also introduced new wine. "I wonder if Yak is interested in having a drink with me." Yak was a bit hesitant when he heard that. He was about to refuse, but just as he said the word "I," Muller interrupted him. I know he was busy with work, but relaxing properly also helps him do his job better. In the end, Yak no longer had any intention of refusing, so he respectfully obeyed. Tai Tu Lao, the sky at this time had also turned into the black color of night. In the dining room, Yak didn't know when he got drunk, his mouth kept nagging, "That hateful fat guy, relying on his higher position than me, ordering me around, not seeing me as a person, where am I inferior to him? When building the spaceship, it was because I solved a technical problem that the spaceship was built." Muller sat opposite him patiently listening to him speak, his mouth saying words of agreement. It was really too much. With Yak's strength, he could completely be in charge of building the spaceship alone. Hearing Muller say that, Yak took the opportunity to say more. "Yes, give me a chance, I will build it for you to see." After saying that, Yak hesitated again, as if there was no chance. As long as that fat guy was there, Han Dynasty would not have the chance to let me build the spaceship alone. Hearing this, Muller suddenly said a sentence with profound meaning. What if there was such an opportunity? Seeing Yak suddenly stiffen upon hearing that, Muller started his plan to entice him. Our Ali kingdom respects someone with technology like Yak very much. As long as he is willing to come to Ali, we will use him as the center to build a spaceship manufacturing team. In that team, everyone must listen to him. Of course, the remuneration will be 3 times that of the Han dynasty. Not knowing what Yak decided, but after hearing those words, he blushed with excitement. After eating and drinking to his heart's content and talking with Yak, Muller thought as he walked home. Although Yak said he would think about it, looking at that expression, he must have been moved. Next, it was the others' turn. In the following days, Muller went everywhere in Chang'an City, attracting many other people. One day, while on the road, he thought that this mission was very difficult, but he didn't expect it to be completed so quickly. He had to report it to Duke and Dix. Suddenly, the Dix group of people from the City Guard Army appeared before Muller, making him wonder, who are you guys? Dix brought up the arrest warrant and spoke up, receiving many reports that he wanted to take Chang'an City's secrets and was arrested. Muller's face now showed a look of panic. He thought to himself, how did it get exposed? Was it someone I contacted who reported? It couldn't be, I gave them such rich treatment, they couldn't possibly not be tempted. Pausing for a few seconds, Muller began to defend himself. Sheriff, are you mistaken? Why did I? At this moment, Yak stepped out from behind Dix, pointed straight at Muller's face and exposed him. No mistake, it was him. Muller saw Yak and asked in surprise, Yak, why are you here? Yak admitted it directly, because I was one of the reporters. Hearing this, Muller couldn't help but be shocked. Why, wasn't he dissatisfied with his work environment and didn't like his superiors? The Ali Kingdom could provide him with a better life, so why did he report it? Yak raised his hand, pointed his thumb at himself and answered loudly, because Han Dynasty is my country, it is it that helped me go from being hungry once a day, full once a day, to being able to eat well and dress warmly like today, and also being respected by everyone. I absolutely will not betray Han Dynasty. After Yak finished speaking, Muller had no more excuses. He was handcuffed, escorted by Dix straight to the arrest site. Let's go. In the dining room of the Emperor's residence, everyone in the room already knew everything. Ellie couldn't help but shout angrily. He dared to spy on our Chang'an City's secrets. We must give him some face. Luong heard this and spoke up to ease the atmosphere. Don't be in a hurry. It's normal for good things to have people eyeing them. Ellie became even angrier when she heard him say that. Young master, why are you still speaking for them? Luong smiled and began to explain, not speaking for them, but the truth. But what you said was right, we can't leave them like this. I give instructions below. Starting from today, establish a new rule. All foreigners entering Han Dynasty must study Han Dynasty's law books, must obey our laws, violators will be deported, forever banned from entering the country. Hearing this, Ellie seemed satisfied. That's right, leave it to me. Shirley sat and listened for a while and still had some doubts, but, could this control others from doing bad things? Luong thought of the 2 Dukes and Dix in his mind, then replied, no, but at least it could intimidate a few people. Of course, for those who really had the guts and a plan, special units would be needed. Mina sat on Lu Feng's left, holding the food on the plate and said excitedly, oh, that kind of person, my wolf warrior squad and the security guard will be very interested. After listening to Mina, Lu Feng leisurely picked up his wine glass and began to speak. However, everyone did not need to worry too much. Many technologies would follow the popularization of knowledge, and Han Dynasty had no way to guarantee it, but as long as Han Dynasty could always maintain its leadership in science and technology, it would not fail compared to other places. Of course, maintaining the lead cannot be done by him alone, it is time to implement new policies. The next day, on the streets of Chang'an City, the newspaper vendor kept shouting the news, special, special, His Majesty has a new order, establishing an invention contest, encouraging everyone to invent and create. The passers-by heard this and couldn't help but be curious. They called the newspaper vendor over and sold them a copy. The crowd turned back to read the latest news. The man in the hat read aloud. As long as one can optimize or create machinery and equipment in the industry one is working in, or improve the household appliances of current life, one can apply for a patent. The blonde man beside him also read the supplement. As long as the patent office passes the examination, one can obtain the generous national reward below. Reading up to here, the beast man behind suddenly shouted, wait, here, first place gets 100 gold coins. The man in the hat heard that and pointed at the newspaper and said loudly, stupid, that's the main point, look at the biggest prize. Hearing the hat-wearing man speak, the blonde man looked at him and then shouted in disbelief, oh my god, the title of royal honor, enjoying royal benefits, still having the opportunity to study in the science department. Hearing this, the man in the hat cleared his throat and explained, I heard that the best area in Chang'an City will be renovated into a residential area for the elite in the future, and it won't even require money. The blonde man's eyes lit up with enthusiasm when he heard that, saying, this is a chance to rise to heaven in one step, I also want to try. The man in the hat said, try, what do you use to try? No theory, no technique. The blonde still blushed as he replied, I can study, yes, I can go to the library. After saying that, he immediately ran away, library, I'm coming. The hat-wearing man's eyes also sparkled when he heard that, saying, "Library, this is also a good place, I'll go try it too." Only the orange-haired beast man was still standing there scratching his head, his face showing 3 question marks, not understanding what just happened. In the Imperial study, Ellie stood next to Lu Feng's desk and happily reported, "Young master, the announcement of your invention just came out, everyone is running to the library, everyone wants to invent something." Hearing this, Lu Feng smiled and replied with satisfaction, "As long as it is beneficial, those people will research and explore, by then the cultural level of the entire city will improve. In 10 inventions, there is one that is usable, and can also help this country, and in the end, it can slowly form its own generation." Speaking of this, Lu Feng suddenly stopped thinking. If he didn't need to copy Earth's technology in the future, would these people develop special science and technology from another world? Why did he feel so looking forward to it? Lu Feng thought and put on a sly face. Ellie looked at him and unconsciously stepped back and whispered, thinking of some strange things again. Ellie continued to ask, "Young master, how do you want to solve the matter of Muller of Ali? He still hasn't said anything. Who instructed him to come and recruit our talents?" Hearing this, Lu Feng raised his hand and waved it a few times, his face showing that he knew everything and answered without thinking anymore. The 2 Ali dukes must have recently arrived in Chang'an City, and were probably blinded by Chang'an City's good stuff. They wanted to get the benefits without paying any price. Lu Feng suddenly revealed a meaningful smile, "But benefits are not so easy to get, it's time to meet them." Outside the Chang'an City Imperial Palace, the 2 dukes of Ali were summoned for a meeting. A beast girl bowed her head to the 2 and said respectfully, "2 dukes, please come this way." While moving, Duke turned to whisper to his companion, "His Majesty Han Dynasty finally agreed to meet us." Duke Dix heard this and leaned in close, raised his hand to cover half of his mouth and whispered, "This timing is very coincidental. But no matter what Muller did, we absolutely do not accept it." Duke understood and replied, "I understand what you mean." Inside the palace, Lu Feng sat lazily on the throne, with Ellie and Mina on either side. The 2 dukes immediately bowed their heads as soon as they entered. "Duke of Ali, Duke Dix of Ali, pay their respects to His Majesty the Han Dynasty." Lu Feng looked at the 2 people after greeting them and waved his hand, saying, "No, I cannot accept your great courtesy. After all, your country does not seem happy to do fair business with my country." Hearing Lu Feng say that, the Duke immediately asked, "What does your Majesty mean by that?" "It is because our Majesty Robinson wants to build a long-term alliance with you that he deliberately sent us here." Lu Feng saw that they were deliberately not understanding his intentions, so he immediately exposed them. "Your country's Chief Muller used unusual means to recruit special talents from my country. Don't say you don't know, he already confessed, under your orders." The 2 dukes were slightly surprised when they heard that. Duke Dix immediately stepped forward and continued to deny. "Your Majesty, we really don't know about this. Muller must have framed us. If your Majesty doesn't believe us, you can call him out and we'll confront him." Looking at the attitude of the 2 people, Lu Feng couldn't help but sigh in his mind, pretending is also real, but there are some things that don't need any evidence at all. He raised his hand and continued speaking, "Your country's leader had to come and do this, I doubt your country's sincerity, there's no need to continue cooperating, you 2 please go back." Only then did the 2 dukes begin to sweat with fear. The Duke stammered, "Your Majesty, here." The 2 turned to exchange glances, the Duke turned to glance, what to do, is he showing off, or is he really not cooperating with us anymore? Duke Dix also caught the signal from the Duke's eyes and silently replied, "We were rude, now we are begging people, whether we accept or not." After exchanging glances, the 2 dukes hurriedly bowed their heads and admitted their guilt. "Your Majesty Lu Feng, we really did not look at you carefully. This time the iron ore that Muller sent can be considered as a gift of compensation from my country to you. I hope that your Majesty can know that your Majesty is absolutely serious about cooperating with your Majesty." The Duke beside him heard Duke Dix speak and couldn't help but turn pale and feel regretful in his heart. There were so many iron ores, he knew he wouldn't have let Muller do that. Lu Feng seemed to have achieved his goal and chuckled. His expression was no longer as solemn as before, but instead he smiled, showing that the 2 dukes understood people's hearts. "I believe that this matter was initiated by the Master Muller himself. I don't know what the 2 dukes wanted to discuss with me this time." Seeing that the matter had probably been overlooked, the Duke immediately spoke up and explained, "That is the case, we want to build a railway and train in Ali, and hope your country can provide the technology." It turned out that they had their eyes on the train. After thinking about it, Lu Feng nodded and agreed, "Okay, but what would everyone like to use in exchange?" Duke Dix asked tentatively, "What did His Majesty mean?" Lu Feng directly stated his request, "I want a portion of the iron ore quota in your hands." Hearing this request, the 2 dukes hesitated a bit, "Your Majesty, your request." Lu Feng saw them hesitate and immediately explained, "Don't worry, if a part of your iron ore belongs to me, then with Ali's development, I will also not tolerate it. No matter what, as long as Ali develops better, my iron ore will be easier to transport and more valuable." The two dukes looked at each other after hearing Lu Feng's words, and finally compromised and said, okay. However, it did not stop there. Lu Feng continued to say that, in addition, once the railway was repaired, the transportation operations must be left to Han Dynasty. Duke heard this and began to hesitate. Lu Feng continued to explain, railways and trains cannot be left alone after they are built, they need a large number of experienced technical staff to maintain them every day. Of course, if the Ali Kingdom can do it, I can also hand it over. After hearing this, the Duke did not hesitate any longer and agreed, if that was the case, then leave it to His Majesty. After the negotiations were over, the two dukes left. Duke's face looked satisfied as he said, in this way, the negotiations were over. Duke Dix, on the other hand, couldn't help but have some hesitation on his face, but was it really okay for him to agree to hand over the transportation to him? Duke's mouth curled up into a sly smile as he replied, what's there to worry about? The railway is built in our interior, and we still have a long way to go. On the high wall, Lu Feng, Mina, and Ellie watched the two dukes leave. Lu Feng suddenly spoke up. Once people get used to certain rules and regulations, it won't be easy to change them. Ellie stood there a little confused and asked him, young master, why are you so determined to get the transportation rights? Hearing Ellie's question, Lu Feng chuckled and explained that holding the railway would give the Ali Kingdom a part of its autonomy. In a nutshell, Han Dynasty provides railways, which can gain great insurance. In a big way, if one day the Ali Kingdom breaks its alliance with us, controlling the railways will have a huge effect. The scene changed to the open sea. Now the storm was rising, lightning struck continuously, the waves rose high, rolling and roaring, the boats looked so weak in the midst of the anger of the sea. The people on the boat shouted loudly and persistently, almost passing the storm sea. After an unknown amount of time, the boats finally reached a calm sea, where the waves were no longer raging. The people on the ship immediately cheered loudly, success. It was Haiin ship. Deacon Hong put his hands on his hips and looked out at the sea. He said, Princess, this time we also passed smoothly without any loss. Letting the mermaid lead the way is indeed very useful. Princess Field closed the book in her hand and replied, to occupy Yinglu, she needed to frequently cross the storm sea, now these few mermen were not enough. Hak Dien Bai's fleet went to the mermaid territory. From a distance another group of mermen were watching. One person turned back and ordered, the FAO Imperial Army has arrived, quickly send the news back. Under the deep sea, the general of the Kuzan mermaid tribe said loudly, are you ready? We know we have to leave this place. Everyone is heartbroken. But as long as we are still here, we can create a new home. So everyone cheer up, the enemy is coming, we definitely cannot be caught. Everyone in the mermaid tribe shouted with determination, yes. General Kuzan raised his hand to signal, go. The entire mermaid tribe followed his direction, leaving their homes one after another. The FAO Army fleet had now stopped in front of the merfolk's residence. A sinister-looking man ordered, below is the residence of the mermaid tribe, use arrows to force them out. The other people on the boat had their bows and arrows ready at the command, and the crossbows and cannons immediately fired arrows. Countless arrows were shot into the water, and on the boat, some other people threw a large net into the place where the shots were just made. One of them gave the order, if anyone dares to run, kill without mercy. Half an hour later, seeing no movement, Princess Field asked suspiciously, what happened? A subordinate then ran back to report, Princess, something seems a bit off, it's been half an hour, not even a single mermaid. Hearing that, Princess Field continued to ask, have you sent someone to investigate? At this moment, the person sent to look at the sea ran back, out of breath, Princess, Princess. Princess Field saw this and asked, what's the matter? The other person quickly reported that the mermaid island was empty, nothing was left, as if it had been cleared away. Princess Field's face wrinkled, she continued doubtfully, move away, what else can be found? The explorer pointed towards the landing beach. Judging from the traces they left behind, it seemed they were heading in that direction. Deacon Hong and the princess looked in the direction the subordinate's hand had just pointed. Deacon Hong was surprised, which direction was that? Princess continued, Yinglu country. She raised her eyebrows and thought to herself, why would the mermaid tribe have connections with Yinglu? Suddenly, someone came out and said, mermaids are so important, we absolutely cannot let them escape. Princess, don't you think so? The person who spoke was Duke Beer of the FAO Empire. Then, a loud shout of command came from the ship, ordering everyone below to pursue with all their might, and to definitely capture the mermaid tribe. Yes. Back in Chang'an City, Lu Feng announced that he had just received news that the FAO Empire army had passed through the storm sea. Their target must be the Han Dynasty. But don't worry, according to the original plan, we'll fight with all our might. Everyone in the room heard this and answered in unison. Yes. In Ellie's office, everyone was busy. Ellie handed the notice to Shirley. She kept giving orders, this one to the military department, this one to the military warehouse, and this one. Leia was also working hard to command the fire troops, she shouted from above. These are all very important fire troops, be careful for me. On the side of Ngadai, gather your troops, quickly, get on the boat for me. In the Imperial study, the Mermaid General Kuzan and his daughter Billis had already arrived. He called out, Your Majesty Lufeng. Lufeng immediately stood up from his chair and replied, Your Majesty Kuzan, Princess Billis. Walking up to the desk, General Kuzan clasped his hands respectfully and said, The area you prepared for my clan, my clansmen, and I are all satisfied, thank you. Hearing this, Lufeng waved his hand as if he didn't care and replied, No need to be so polite. This is what we discussed. General Kuzan raised his hand to his head and laughed heartily, saying, My army of 1,000 men is ready, we can set off at any time. Lufeng laughed back when he heard this and replied, Then please give your majesty some instructions. Our preparations for battle are complete, and we will set off tomorrow. At this moment, on the FAO Army fleet side, in the middle of the clear blue sea with seagulls flying around, a voice rang out again. After chasing for 5 days, they still couldn't find any trace of the mermaid. A shout was immediately heard, scolding, Useless, can't even do such a small thing. It was Duke Beer's voice. He continued to shout, Leave, no need to chase for now, what is the princess busy with? Someone then replied, The princess was ready and was about to arrive at Haiin City. Princess Field looked out at the distant sea for a moment, then gave the order. The vanguard army obeyed and headed to Haiin City. The FAO Empire's fleet set sail for Haiin City. After several days and nights, they were almost there. The early morning scene on the open sea was extremely romantic, the waves were rippling, the sunlight gently shone on the sparkling sea surface, and seagulls filled the sky. A soldier stood on the boat, frowning as he looked forward, as if he had discovered something. From afar, the silhouette of the fleet of Haiin Army appeared. The soldier saw this and panicked, running down to report to his superiors. He shouted loudly, The captain of the Haiin Army has discovered us. The knight leader calmly ordered his subordinates to follow the previous plan to attack other countries. Prepare the battle formation. The army of Haiin City also quickly prepared at this time. The subordinate ran in to report to General Ngudai. General, the distance is only 200 m, already within firing range. General Ngudai frowned, his face solemn as he said, Get ready. Then both sides, the FAO Empire's knight captain and the general with fierce faces shouted in unison and fired. Arrows were shot from both sides like rain. The FAO Empire used regular arrows while the Haiin Army used fire arrows. The soldiers of Haiin City used iron shields to block arrows. Because they practiced thoroughly every day, avoiding these arrows was quite easy for them. On the FAO Empire's side, thousands of fire arrows were flying towards the ship, burning the canvas sails, the deck, and the wooden ship, so the fire easily spread throughout the ship. FAO's soldiers were shocked and bewildered when they saw this. What? What happened? With such a long range, why did their arrows still burn? They were frantic, screaming in pain. Save me, put out the fire, help, the captain shouted. Retreat, jump into the sea. Princess Field stood on the boat, looking at her warship that was on fire, but remained calm and composed, without any fear. She turned to tell Deacon Hong, telling them to retreat. Haiin Tan had already prepared, there was no point in fighting anymore. General Nyo Dai watched the enemy from afar through binoculars. The FAO Empire's ships were burning, with heavy damage. A soldier suddenly came in to report the situation to General Nyo Dai, confirming the enemy's retreat. General Nyo replied, I see, as expected of the new product of the Ministry of Engineering, this black oil rocket is really useful. The soldier continued, I heard that it will be even more powerful in the future, this is only the initial design. Nyo Dai smiled and replied, As long as the weapon is useful to us, that's fine. Let's go, return to Haiin City, and report the victory to His Majesty Lufeng. Having said that, the fleet set off back to Haiin City, reporting the situation of the battle with the FAO Empire to His Majesty Lufeng via pager. His Majesty received the news and also sent back a letter of instructions. General Nyo Dai entered the telegraph office of Haiin City and asked the soldier who received the letter, What did His Majesty Lufeng say? The soldier smiled happily and said, His Majesty told him to be careful and absolutely not to let FAO's army land. General Ngudai's face was filled with pride, he raised his hand to salute solemnly, and shouted loudly, Yes. After a humiliating defeat, the FAO Empire fleet quietly turned around and retreated. The soldiers of the FAO Empire led a stranger into the princess's room. The strange man entered Princess Field's room, placed his hand on his chest, bowed his head respectfully, and said, Jalunya greets the princess. The princess asked him, How is Yinglu's situation now? Jalunya replied, Princess, now Yinglu is not called Yinglu anymore, but Han Dynasty. Princess Field looked surprised after hearing this, and continued to ask, recounting in detail the situation after we left. Jalunya replied, Yes. He told the whole story. Princess Field picked up the map and looked at it, so now the Han Dynasty Kingdom belongs to Lufeng Xiang City. Jalunya answered loudly, yes. Princess Field looked at the map thoughtfully and continued, with that person, it is impossible for us to go to Haiin City. Deacon Hong quickly interrupted the princess, but princess, our supplies are only enough to last a few days, if we don't get ashore. Princess Field pointed at the map and said, then this is the only place. However, with Lu Feng's way of doing things, perhaps the place had already been prepared. Her eyes were cold as she continued, I need someone to check for me. On this side, the soldier overheard Princess Field's conversation and quickly returned to report to Duke Beer. Duke Beer turned around and said, you said Field has scouted out another place to land. The subordinate replied loudly, yes, that place is the mouth of the Utree River, it seems much safer than Haiin City. The vanguard army was defeated, the princess is still resting, but sooner or later she will set off to that place. Duke Beer crossed his arms, my face darkened, the corners of my mouth curled up, my expression full of scheming. He thought to himself, Field had experienced failure in Haiin City, still decided to go to Yushui River, proving that the safety in Yushui River had a certain degree of assurance. That piece of fat meat of Englu, she couldn't be allowed to eat it alone. Duke Beer then ordered his subordinates to prepare their ships and immediately head to the Utree River. Night fell, Duke Beer's fleet docked at the Utree River. The red-haired subordinate hurriedly reported, Duke Beer, we have entered the Utree River. Duke Beer ordered him, command, move carefully. The red-haired subordinate loudly replied, yes. On the bank of the Utree River, the army of Haiin Citadel was already lying in ambush. After seeing that the FAO Army's fleet had reached their territory, the Haiin soldiers quickly reported to General Nyo Dai, the commander, that they had been surrounded. General Nyo Dai gave the order, informing everyone to wait for my signal. Hearing Nyo Dai's command, everyone got into combat-ready positions. A moment later, a strange sound was heard, and the sky flashed with the brilliant light of fireworks. A loud shout rang out, and they fired freely. After the words were finished, a series of fire arrows flew out from the reeds on the bank of the Utree River, heading straight for the FAO Army's fleet. The soldiers of the FAO Empire were attacked so suddenly that they had no time to react. They were terrified. This was bad, there was an ambush. Fire broke out on Duke Beer's fleet. At this moment, Princess Field's subordinates hurriedly reported that Princess and Duke Beer were attacked. The princess turned away, her face cold, seemingly not wanting to rescue Duke Beer, calmly telling her subordinate, just look. The subordinate had a blank expression, hesitantly replied, yes. After saying that, she rested her chin on her hand, thinking deeply. Indeed, Haiin City was heavily guarded, and this Utree seaport was not overlooked either. Then there is also that Air Force of Lufeng who will also monitor me strictly, no matter where I go, they will follow me. Wanting to find a place to land the boat is really not easy. While Princess Field was deep in thought, the subordinate knelt down and bowed his head, continuing to speak. The matter you told us has progressed. The princess was very happy to hear this news and said, oh, this is good news. Duke Beer's fleet burned down, soldiers died everywhere, falling to the bottom of the Utree River. At this moment, under the Utree River, the Mermaid tribe was ambushing at the bottom of Duke Beer's boat. They used weapons to pound hard on the bottom of the boat. Duke Beer's soldier saw this and quickly reported, my lord, there are mermaids under the water destroying our boat. Duke Beer was angry and panicked, shouting, come closer to the shore. Quickly come closer to the shore and dock. At this time, General Nyo Dai led his army to directly attack the fleet of the FAO Empire. Nyo Dai shouted loudly, the three squads prepared to shoot. The target was close. Launch. Another volley of arrows shot out and shot straight at Duke Beer's ship. The soldiers saw that the momentum of the Haiin army was too strong and shouted loudly. The Duke is completely unable to fight. We must retreat quickly. Duke Beer held tightly onto the ship's wall, gritted his teeth, his face darkened, and he looked unwilling. He commanded his subordinates to retreat, retreat. After that, the Duke's army retreated and fled. They sat down in disgust. Duke Beer bowed his head to the table and sighed, saying, the loss is terrible. The orange-haired soldier was furious, slamming his fist on the table and shouting. Damn it, Field must have thought of this long ago. They are the ones who set us up. The black-haired soldier looked extremely worried. Your Highness the Duke, what should we do now? Duke Beer stood up and spoke gently, leaning against Field. The two soldiers looked at each other and spoke loudly. What? The black-haired soldier reminded Beer. Your Highness, don't forget, who ordered us? Duke Beer questioned. If not, then what? Could it be that we can still return to our country with just our current fleet and supplies? The two soldiers hesitantly replied. Here. These things the two of them had not thought of, had not anticipated what would happen. Duke Beer continued, letting the messenger set out, conveying the message to His Highness. Now our fleet, willing to accept your Highness's command, The two soldiers replied. Yes. With that, Duke Beer sent someone to deliver a secret letter to Princess Field. Princess Field took the letter and read it, then spoke. If the Duke says so, I will not be polite. Hearing this, the soldier bowed his head, placed his hand on his chest and respectfully said, thanking your highness for his tolerance and generosity. Princess Field smiled and gave instructions. Go back and tell the Duke. As for how to gain benefits from our expedition, I have a new plan. In the silence of the night, Duke Beer's warship was burning brightly in the Utree River. While the two sides were fighting fiercely, on the other side of the river, a group of merchants took advantage of the opportunity to sneak into Yinhai City with the intention of capturing the main character. They rowed their boats to the bank of the Utree River. There was the sound of the boat hitting the embankment. One of them said, "It's so dark, can we light a fire?" The guy standing next to him heard this and immediately hit him on the head and shouted, "You idiot, you want to kill us all." The guy wearing a white shirt and blonde hair looked like an educated young man. "Step ashore," urged the guys behind, "hurry up, take advantage of the fighting on the other side, don't pay attention to us." The man in brown came ashore, looking quite excited as he clenched his fists and said with a smile, "But just like that, we are the first group of merchants to arrive at Han Dynasty." As they were walking up the shore, they were suddenly stopped by a group of people. The blonde man in a white shirt shouted in panic. Who was it? Only then did he realize that it was a soldier from Haiin. The two merchants standing behind were also confused, it was dangerous. Then these three people suddenly raised their hands in surrender, saying, "Don't attack. We surrender, we are merchants, we come to do business." The soldier ran back to report the name to General Nyo Dai. General Nyo Dai asked again, "FAO merchant? Checked?" The soldier replied loudly, there was indeed no military fire. Each person's hands were also very clean, unlike soldiers, and they also carried a large amount of supplies, but the possibility of being a spy could not be ruled out. General Nyo Dai stroked his chin and continued, using a telegram to send a message to His Majesty, asking His Majesty to make a decision. The soldiers obeyed and replied, "Yes." The telegram reached Chang'an City. His Majesty Luong picked up the letter and looked at it, saying, "Nyoda has captured FAO's merchant." Ellie stood behind and asked His Majesty, "They came so quickly, the war is not over yet." His Majesty Luong replied, "People die for money, birds die for food, if there is enough benefit, the courage of merchants will be greater than you think." Then His Majesty Luong ordered the soldiers in front, commanding Nyoda to release the people. They can only operate in Chang'an City. However, all the FAO merchants behind them were captured before the war ended. These are unusual times, I don't need so many merchants. The soldiers bowed their heads and replied, "Yes." Receiving orders from His Majesty Luong, Nyo Dai released the three of them. The soldier said with his hands behind his back, "You are released, and you are allowed to do business, but only limited to Chang'an City. I will take you by spaceship to Chang'an City later." The three merchants repeatedly said, thank you, sir." Suddenly, the white-shirted, blonde-haired, bright-faced man didn't quite understand what the soldier was saying, so he asked the man standing next to him what a spaceship was. The man standing next to him looked dumbfounded and replied, "Who knows, as long as it gives us business." The leader shyly asked the soldier, "Yes sir, our goods." The soldier replied, "Don't worry, we have helped you transfer it to the spaceship. When the spaceship arrives, someone will take you to get the goods." Having said that, the three of them got on the carriage and left the Haiin Palace to the spaceship to go to Chang'an City. Getting out of the car, everyone was stunned, eyes wide open, exclaiming, "Oh my god." Before the three of them was a giant spherical metal ball floating in the air. The soldier introduced, "Okay, that's the spaceship you'll be sitting on." The handsome young man in the white shirt couldn't help but exclaim, "Too surprising, to bring us to Chang'an City, they even used this to pick us up." The soldier replied with a wry smile, "Huh? Young man, don't think so much. This is a spaceship carrying seafood to Chang'an City." The three men listened, their faces blank like stupid children, stammering and asking the soldier, using that to carry seafood. After a few hours, the three of them landed safely in Chang'an City. A well-dressed man, an immigration officer, handed each of the three men a book and said, "This is the Han Dynasty law book. Before you do anything, you must look at this book first, then decide whether to do it or not." The three men happily received the books and replied, Okay. Opening the ledger, the white-shirted, blonde-haired man exclaimed in panic, "Ah, bringing goods into the city requires a 10% tax." The brown-shirted, blonde-haired man standing next to him also said, "That's a bit high. But it's okay, the things we brought are all top-notch products from FAO. This little bit of money can be earned back." The customs officer in charge of import and export procedures smiled and said, "We have finished checking everyone's goods. Everyone can price their goods yourself." The brown-clothed, blonde-haired man replied, 50 gold coins. The female employee was stunned, hesitantly asked again, everyone confirmed. The brown-haired man in the yellow shirt saw that the female employee was having trouble saying something and asked, of course, is there a problem? The female employee smiled shyly and replied, no, if everyone has decided, then let's do it like that. This is everyone's document, don't lose it. The three merchants happily left. At this moment, the red-haired female employee spoke up, what a strange group of people. The blonde-haired female animal colleague beside her didn't understand what was going on and asked back, what's wrong? The red-haired employee rested her chin on her hand as she recounted what had just happened. Just now, that group of merchants, whose goods we had appraised were only worth 10 gold coins, offered us 50 gold coins. Don't you think that's strange? The female colleague next to her laughed and replied, maybe they're fools with a lot of money. Three merchants went to the big market. Because they were unfamiliar with the area, the situation, and the rules there, they paid a merchant named Olaf to be their guide. After being given a tour and being informed of the rules here, everyone stopped in a corner to talk. Merchant Olaf said, Mr. Fenton, this is a big market. I bet, there is no place in Chang'an City more suitable to sell your goods than this place. Merchant Fenton replied, thank you Mr. Olaf. Having a tour guide like you is indeed much easier. Olaf laughed loudly, then said, you paid to hire me, of course I have to serve you well, so what do you think about this place? If it's not bad, I'll help you with the paperwork, opening a shop here requires different registration than other cities. The merchant in white shirt and blonde hair raised his hand and commented, Fenton, the number of people here is very good, let's stay here. Hearing that, Fenton took out a bag of gold from his pants and gave it to Olaf, saying, then please trouble Mr. Olaf to take us there. Olaf happily took the money and replied, it's no big deal. Having said that, the three of them laid out their goods on the sidewalk. Fenton put his hands on his hips and confidently said, alright, these things will definitely sell out soon. The rest of the things will heat up tomorrow to attract attention and sell later. Olaf looked at the goods they displayed and was speechless. He stammered and asked, oh, is this everyone's best stuff? They hung a bright red banner and stood with a confident look, but all day long no one paid any attention. The three of them seemed invisible in the crowd, standing still, the wind blowing the fallen leaves. There was a faint smell of the countryside here. The man in the white shirt looked bright and said in dissatisfaction, why? Why isn't anyone coming to see? The mushroom-headed man looked a bit stupid and said, people in Chang'an City are too cold. Only then did a few passers-by pay attention. A sheep boy was a little interested in their goods, so he sat down and asked, boss, what is this? Fenton smiled invitingly and replied, this is buckwheat cake, a specialty of the FAO Empire, very delicious, you can try it. The mushroom-headed guy with a slightly stupid face also quickly replied, 1 coin each, try it, it's our famous delicacy, it's not available in Chang'an City. The sheep boy saw this and was curious, so he took one and tried it. Chang'an City's cuisine was fine. Then let me try it. Just as he tried to put a piece in his mouth, he grimaced, my face darkened, I spat the piece of cake out of my mouth, and shouted at the owner, what is this? I threw up, a lie, what kind of delicacy? After saying that, I ran straight ahead. Fenton said loudly, bewildered, oh, wait, customer. Then he said to the two guys beside him, why is it like this? This is clearly the best-selling cake on our side. The guy in the white shirt and blonde hair picked up the cake and took a bite to see if it was as the customer said. He said while eating, the taste hasn't changed. Is it not to our taste? At this time, Olaf was standing on the side of the road witnessing the whole scene. He walked over and said, if you don't mind, let me try it. The blonde-haired man in the white shirt handed Olaf a cake. Olaf took a bite. The white shirt man's eyes sparkled with anticipation as he asked, how is it? Is it delicious? Is it great? Olaf's expression at this moment was no different from the rescuer's earlier. Frowning, he immediately handed over the piece of cake, then asked again, looking at my expression, does it look like it's delicious? The blonde-haired white-shirt man was dumbfounded and didn't know what to say. At this time in the Imperial study, Ellie put her hands on her face and asked Luong with a cute expression, young master, why did you let the FAO merchants enter the country? Luong looked at Ellie and replied, do you remember what I said about the nature of merchants? Ellie replied, pursuing benefits. Luong replied, yes, when those merchants realize our goods are superior. They will voluntarily bring our goods back to their country to gain benefits. In order to quickly sell out the goods, they will help us promote the theory that Han Dynasty goods are the best at FAO. Luong held the Han Dynasty foreign trade sales plan in his hand and continued, by then, it will be much easier for us to do business. The golden pizza is covered in melted cheese, the aroma spreads, put it in your mouth and take a bite, the crust is crispy but the inside is still soft and moist, the cheese is chewy and fatty, the beef is stuffed with salty and creamy sauce, the vegetables are fresh and sweet. This cake is truly a delicacy on earth. Taking a bite and chewing it awakens all the senses, taking one straight to heaven. The FAO merchants ate it and shouted with joy. It was delicious, it was really several times more delicious than our buckwheat cake. This pizza, the FAO people will definitely love it. Seeing the merchants so excited, the Chang'an city tourist friend laughed and replied, it's good that everyone likes it. A merchant, so happy that he cried, said, I didn't say it, but the people of Chang'an city are really too happy. The mushroom-headed man beside him also agreed, then asked, are you going to continue renting this place to display your goods? The blonde guy immediately replied, no more renting, our stuff is completely unsaleable, let's sell it cheap, quickly recover some capital. The other guy said worriedly, just like that it's a loss. To the other guy's stupid words, the blonde guy replied, you idiot, of course I have to give up the cargo ship's position to buy things from Chang'an city. You see, our stuff here really doesn't sell, but that doesn't mean our empire doesn't like the stuff here. The man in white stood up and said happily, yes, if the item is this good, the other items will definitely not be bad either. The blonde man, probably the leader of the merchant group, walked towards the Tauren and said, Olaf, please take us for a walk. Olaf happily agreed, this is my job. Let's go to the supermarket today to try, if you want to do business, the goods there are the most valuable. The FAO merchants were taken to the supermarket by Olaf. As soon as they reached the door, the crowd gasped in surprise. Fenton, this place looks really lively. Looking at the crowd jostling in front of the door, the other guy also replied, that's right, if we could get half of this number of people to display our goods, it would be great. Olaf saw the crowd standing there dumbfounded, so he called out, come on, I'll show you guys something. Inside the supermarket, the group of people pushing carts looked at the strange things on the shelves and said, all things they had never seen before. Olaf replied proudly, of course, these things were currently only available in Chang'an city. Then, at the perfume counter, Olaf talked non-stop about this perfume, which is something that makes the body smell better. Only the rich people in Chang'an city can afford to use this, it is very popular with women. Looking at the tiny pink perfume bottle in Olaf's hand, the merchants opened their mouths wide, it was too expensive, 1 gold coin a bottle. The leader saw it and said with interest, as long as the goods were good, with this little capital, he could get it back, buy it, bring it back and sell it for 5 gold coins. Wherever the merchants went, they grabbed everything into their carts, making the customers in the supermarket feel embarrassed. Olaf saw the crowd getting too excited and said, let's go, there are more good things than just these. The merchant leader thought to himself, the goods are good, but the quantity is a bit small. Then he asked Olaf in a friendly manner, oh, right, is there anywhere that's cheap and has a lot of variety? It's not good to have only these things for a sea voyage. Olaf turned around and asked, what would you like to try? The other guy immediately replied, fabrics, food, preferably Han Dynasty specialties, and also general merchandise. Olaf immediately replied confidently, leaving it to me with peace of mind, guaranteed satisfaction. At Tori's clothing store, the merchants were gaping in amazement at the quality and price, this high-class fabric, and it was only $2. Tori said, sir, this is only second-class fabric, there are better ones above. Seeing that the quality and price were so good, the merchant immediately said, then give me 500 pieces of this fabric, 300 pieces of grade 3 fabric. Tori was happy to see that, gave the merchant a like, praising the generous customer. Then they went to the canned goods shop, the white-clothed merchant was immersed in the wonderful taste of the food there, it was so delicious, he would definitely make money. The head merchant was closing the deal, boss, give me 1,000 boxes of this. The next place was the ceramic shop Olaf was introducing, this was also something that only Han Dynasty had. The merchant happily replied, very good, must take 300 pieces. Then he took out a necklace with an emerald pendant, making the group leader's eyes light up, and bought it for me. But the mushroom-headed guy behind stopped him, wait. Then whispered in his ear. Boss, the money is almost gone, we still have to hire a boat to take us back to Haiin city. This sentence made the boss's face darken with regret. At the port, looking at the pile of goods, the mushroom-headed man grumbled, really, I didn't tell him to stop and didn't know I bought too much. The man in white replied lightly, it's okay, when we sell it later we'll make more money, this is all money. The merchant group's boss was talking to the captain was helping us load the goods. The captain happily accepted the bag of money and agreed, okay, we have signed the contract, tomorrow we will arrive on time. Then turned back to the Tauren, these 2 days, thank you. Olaf politely replied. Mr. Fenton is too polite, now that my work is done, I will go first. Olaf was about to turn around and leave when the merchant caravan leader stopped him. I have one more thing to say, I want to invite you to come with us on a boat. How about a trip to FAO? Master Olaf looked surprised, Fenton continued, since you understand these items well, when it comes time to sell, you can help us introduce them. Don't worry, the rental fee is of course 3 times the tour guide fee. No, I'll give you 100 gold coins. Olaf scratched his head in embarrassment and replied, I'll probably have to think about this some more. Then Olaf left. The merchants waved and said, well, before we go, you can come find us anytime. Olaf happily agreed. As soon as the merchants left, the bull tribe man's expression changed, his face darkening dangerously. Then he came to a deserted building. As soon as he arrived, the man in black robe spoke up. The person who came was Zhuge Kongming. He stepped in and replied, "Shut up, I'm a shameless old thief." The other guy then said, "The signal is right. Sit down. How is the situation?" Olaf immediately reported, "Normal contact with the target, smoothly introducing the items to the target, not causing suspicion." But a special situation appeared. The target invited me to go to their country. I did not refuse, but said I needed to think more. The man in black immediately handed Olaf a document and said, "Well, if that's the case, then you can agree. The organization has a new mission for you." Olaf reached out to take the document and said, "Is it to set up an intelligence post in Fabro?" The man in black immediately replied, "Yes." Olaf took the mission document and said, "Understood." On the sea, the fog was thick, 3 large boats gliding on the sea surface. On the boat, Marquis Lester looked ahead and said, "We have finally left the stormy sea." Suddenly there was a loud report, "Sir, the fleet was discovered ahead." The Marquis was surprised. "What, is it the Fabro fleet?" The other guy said, "I don't know, the other side didn't have sails." The Marquis was angry and hateful. Everyone listened and prepared for battle. Everyone was ready to answer, "Yes." The other side of the boat, there was a voice on the boat, "How is it, can we see their sails? Are they Fabro's men?" There was a reply, "Can't see clearly, big brother, the fog is thick here too, and it's too far." The fleet on this side belonged to the Torola Empire, and the voices just now belonged to the first Prince Knight and second Prince Nemo. The first prince looked towards the unidentified fleet ahead and told the soldiers to raise their morale, they might have to go to war. The second prince understood the situation and agreed, "Yes." At Chang'an City Airport, Luong walked towards the spaceship. Ellie followed behind and asked, "Young master, do you really want to go to Haiin City?" Luong replied, "Yes, there is another fleet of ships coming from there. It could be reinforcements or it could be a new enemy. So I decided to go there and take a look. I'll leave the big and small matters in Chang'an City to you for now," Luong said as he attentively studied the documents in his hand. At this time, Mina stood up from behind and pulled Lu Feng's shirt, worriedly saying, "Young master, let's stop, it's too dangerous over there." Ellie agrees, "Yes." Luong smiled and handed the document to Ellie, reassuring her, "Don't worry, you have to believe in our abilities. Besides, won't there be Mina?" Besides, he felt that this trip might have unexpected joy. At the same time, in the area near the sea of Haiin City, there was a purple-haired girl, clinging to a large wooden barrel, drifting on the sea. The girl was drenched and tattered, struggling to look forward and said, "Ah, how long has it been?" Leading to this situation, it must be said that a few days ago, during a stormy night, lightning struck the sea, big waves made the fleet sway, loud commands tried to drown out the sound of the storm, the sailors slowed down, the waves were too big. In the cockpit, everyone tensed up and steered the boat, following the boat in front, following the path they had taken. "Stay calm." Before lowering the sail rope broke. The sailors shouted loudly, "The rope is broken, quickly control the sail." "Not good, the boat is moving too fast, the boat is rocking more and more violently." The boats behind saw this and shouted loudly, "The boat in front is about to capsize." But the boat was not strong enough to resist the wrath of nature, the sea water sank the ship. This purple-haired girl was lucky to cling to an empty barrel and escape death. After drifting at sea for several days, she was completely exhausted. She angrily said, "It seems I will die here." The girl collapsed, not knowing that not far away, 2 mermaids rose to the surface of the water to observe her. On Haiin City, Luong used binoculars to observe the 2 fleets at sea, then put down the binoculars. Luong asked Nyo Dai, "Do you know their identities?" Nyo Dai bowed his head and replied, "I don't know yet, but I've sent a mermaid to scout, so I should have news soon." Suddenly there was a loud voice, "Report, report, the 3rd detective team is back, and they also brought a spirit." Luong turned around in surprise, "Oh." The elf mentioned was the purple-haired girl floating in the sea, probably saved by the mermaid. The elf sat in front of the fire, trembling as he said, My name is Jenny, I come from the Larsen Empire, I went with Marquis Lester. But at sea, there were big waves, my boat sank." Nyoda came forward and asked, "How many people are there in total?" The little elf girl who was afraid of the sea replied, "Probably, 4 to 5,000 people. I was not traveling with them, I secretly boarded the ship, just wanted to go to the mainland to take a look." Luong sat down in front of the little girl and reassured her, "Don't be afraid. Tell me what kind of relationship you have with Fabro." The little girl calmed down and replied, This must be an enemy relationship. I just heard it from others." Luong stood up and pointed to the boat in the distance, saying, "Look, is that the boat over there?" The girl observed for a moment and then replied, "Yes, on the left is the fleet of the Marquis of Leicester." Luong said to everyone, "Okay, let her go down and rest well, take care of her." Luong walked towards the city wall to observe the 2 fleets. Nyo Dai asked, "Your Majesty, what should we do?" Lu Feng replied, there was no rush, he sent a few more people to monitor them, first see what they would do. Little Jenny was taken down to rest. On the Larson fleet, Marquis Lester sat at his desk, spread out a map, and asked his subordinate how many days our supplies could last. His subordinate immediately replied, 3 days, my lord. The Marquis shouted angrily, insisting on getting ashore before then. Suddenly another subordinate came and said, my lord, confirmed, the person opposite is from the Torola Empire. Hearing that, the Marquis let out a surprised exclamation. On the Torola side of the ship, the second prince led the elves onto the opposite ship, talking as he walked, big brother, the opposite ship has news, it's confirmed that they are from the Larson Empire. The Grand Prince Knight, hearing this, breathed a sigh of relief. Luckily it wasn't for Bros people, otherwise it would have been very troublesome. The elf subordinate spoke up at this moment, I have met your highness. I am here on behalf of the Marquis. This is just a misunderstanding, the first prince waved his hand. If so, there is no need for us to argue anymore. As for going ashore, what are your plans? The other person immediately replied, the Marquis is preparing to write a letter to the city opposite, requesting to come ashore, to avoid unnecessary disputes. He wants to ask the other days to work together. If they refuse, he also invites your country to join forces with us, attack together, and share the benefits in the future. The first prince immediately agreed upon hearing that, of course there is no problem. In the office, Lu Feng was studying the documents and said to Nyoda, let's let them land, if they don't agree, we can attack the city. If they want to fight, then fight them. Nyoda, I'll leave it to you, Nyoda also continued, his tone was really loud. Yes, your majesty. On the Larson Empire fleet, a subordinate reported, my lord the Marquis, the fleet of that city has arrived. The Marquis turned back and looked, seemingly refusing. Facing such a large fleet of ours, they dare to come out to fight, they are truly arrogant. Let's teach them a lesson. The other guy immediately obeyed and replied, yes. On the Torola Empire ship, the Grand Prince drew his sword and said to his subordinates below, soldiers, the battle has begun, let's crush humanity. The people below cheered. But right after that these guys whispered, no more fighting, we surrender. Their boat was smashed to pieces, just a pile of rubble on the sea. They tried to hold on to the wooden boards, raising their hands in surrender. In the mansion, Haiin City, a sneeze sounded. Lu Feng sat majestically on the chair, behind him were Mina and Yoda. The great Prince Knight of Torola and Marquis Lester of Larson were trembling as they bowed their heads and said, thanking His Majesty for allowing us to dock. Lu Feng immediately denied, wait, I didn't say I agreed to let you guys go ashore. You guys invaded Han Dynasty, I haven't settled this debt with you yet. The Marquis's face was filled with fear, and he said, sorry, regarding this matter, we apologize to you, it's just that we really want to reach the port soon. Lu Feng coldly replied, that's your business. I don't ask for much, if you want to dock, you can dock and compensate the Han Dynasty for war losses. Hearing about the landing, the Crown Prince loudly said, Your Majesty Lu Feng, our Torola Empire is willing to compensate your country with 5,000 gold coins. The number startled the Marquis, 5,000? Then he continued, Your Majesty, I also agree to pay 5,000 in compensation. Lu Feng replied disdainfully, 5,000, I want 1,000,000 gold coins. The other two were shocked, what? Mina was a little surprised by Lu Feng's tone. The angry Grand Prince Knight was about to charge forward, but was stopped by the Marquis, calm down, this is just raising the price to trick us. Then he smiled and replied, Your Majesty, 1,000,000 is too much, we really can't take it out now. How about we add 20,000? Lu Feng did not reply, turned around and stood up, Mina let's go. Seeing that, the Marquis panicked and called out, His Majesty stopped. Then stammered, 100,000 gold coins, this is the most we can pay. The Crown Prince also continued, Your Majesty, we cannot take more. Mina immediately spoke up, Young Master, it seems they don't have any. Lu Feng replied, Yes, I know. Then Lu Feng continued to bid, at least 300,000 gold coins. The Crown Prince trembled, Your Majesty, this doesn't sound sincere at all. The Marquis also added, Your Majesty, it's impossible. Lu Feng said, Don't be in a hurry, I know you guys really don't have that much gold coins right now, but that doesn't mean your empire doesn't have any. The Marquis stammered, but the fleet had no way of holding out until we returned home. Lu Feng continued, So you guys pay 100,000 first, I can let you guys go ashore to sort things out. Then you guys get on the boat, send half of our team to escort our goods to your empire. Wait until all the goods are sold, then come back here with the money. At that time, I will naturally let you guys leave safely. The Crown Prince was furious when he heard this, what a joke, he was the great king of the empire, how could he be a hostage? Then he shouted loudly, No, this can't be done, he was about to rush towards Lu Feng. Nyoda shouted loudly, rudely, and retreated. Lu Feng saw that and said, Then now you guys take out 200,000 gold coins. The Crown Prince gritted his teeth and said, Your Majesty Lu Feng, do you want to force us to death? Lu Feng laughed and replied, forcing you guys, huh? You guys don't have that qualification. The Marquis patted the eldest prince's shoulder to stop him from getting even angrier. But your majesty, if we hand over 100,000 taels of gold to you, we won't be able to feed the remaining knights. By then, once they rebel, we will also die. Lu Feng waved his hand and replied, don't worry, I will arrange work for you guys can stay and work to earn money with peace of mind. After hearing that, the Taoist prince continued to panic, work. The Marquis whispered to the Crown Prince, Your Highness Knight, I know you're angry, but it's not appropriate to tear his face apart right now. Let's go ashore and tidy up first. The Crown Prince, although reluctant to agree, still gritted his teeth and said, then he must thank your majesty. Lu Feng smiled and replied, let's cooperate happily. The eldest prince's face darkened, thinking to himself, Lu Feng, I will remember this debt. Lu Feng told Niu Dai, from now on, just arrange as I instructed, find them work, many of our construction projects need manpower, don't waste these people. Niu Dai raised his hand, saluted according to military orders and replied, yes. Lu Feng continued, also don't let them land on the shore of Haiin City, send them to Minglin City. Later on, Haiin City was a semi-militarized foreign trade port of the Han Dynasty. It was not suitable for many enemy soldiers to exist. Niu Dai asked curiously, a trade port, then young master, if there are merchants coming in the future? Lu Feng replied, asking their trade target, confirming there were no mistakes then let them go, but only limited their activities within Haiin City. After listening, Niu Dai replied, he understood, then continued, that's right young master, how did that girl named Jenny deal with it? She's been needing a lot of paper and pens lately, she said she wanted to draw. Hearing that, Mina was surprised and opened her mouth wide, her eyes wide, asking, drawing, could it be a spy? Lu Feng thought for a moment then replied, don't jump to conclusions yet, call her over, if she really is a spy, we can use our best strategy. The spirit Jenny was brought before Lu Feng, fearfully saying, Your Majesty, you called me. Lu Feng saw this and immediately replied, I heard you know how to draw, can you show me? The little girl handed the book of paintings to Lu Feng, of course, this is my honor. Lu Feng flipped through the picture files while thinking. Mina stood to the side in surprise. Wow, Your Majesty, Jenny's drawings are so beautiful. Lu Feng looked at the landscape paintings in front of him, thinking, they were all unimportant places, but still couldn't confirm that she wasn't a spy. Lu Feng looked at the girl and praised her, her painting is very beautiful. Jenny immediately replied, thank you for your compliment, Your Majesty. Lu Feng then continued, let's do it this way. If you agree, you can return with us to Chang'an City, there is a shortage of painting teachers there, the monthly salary is 1 silver coin. Hearing the attractive invitation, the little girl's face lit up as she replied, 1 silver coin a month, really? I never expected that I could rely on this to make money to support myself. Lu Feng saw this and said, you prepare a bit, we will call you when we set off. The girl bowed her head and replied, yes, thank you, Your Majesty. Mina turned to Lu Feng and said, young master, why do I feel like this girl doesn't look like a spy? Lu Feng watched the girl happily leave the room and said, I don't know, let's go back and talk more before deciding. That's right, I'll tell someone to pay attention, where did the FAO team go, they won't disappear like that. Mina replied yes. It was late at night, the moon was shining brightly in the sky. At a certain city, a fleet of boats had just docked. A woman stepped ashore, the people on the dock welcomed her, she had finally arrived. Our lord has been waiting for you for a long time, Your Highness Field. It turns out that the fleet that just docked belongs to Princess Field of the FAO Kingdom, standing with her arms crossed, looking regal at the group of people behind her who were her guards. In the Yadian Kingdom, in the temple, the leader of the cult was sitting on the throne, listening to the report of his subordinates who had just returned. Your Excellency, the expeditionary knights are trapped in the Han Dynasty. We are still trying to contact them, but to no avail. The food supplies in the east are insufficient, and famine is likely to occur. Prices in the capital are rising, and if this continues, the people will resent it. The sect leader put his hands on his hips and said angrily, there is no good news. Then he turned to ask his subordinate, how is it in the south? The subordinate immediately replied, the great sect leader, regarding the suppression of the rebels in the south, has still failed. They have already reached the central city, and are now on the other side reorganizing and gathering troops. A group of military officials heard this and started to discuss. Then, aren't they about to reach the royal capital? The other person replied, I heard that the priests in those cities don't have a good ending. The sect leader angrily growled, what should we do, Timothy? At this moment, Princess Field entered, and several priests wondered. Who is that person? Another replied, he didn't know. The guard saw her enter and shouted, who are you? Don't you know women can't enter the hall of the divine meeting? She glanced and replied, so what do you want me to do? The sect master immediately told the guard to step back. The guard bowed his head and replied, yes, great sect master. The Grand Master looked at the lady in front of him and replied, welcoming her here. Miss Field, I already knew about your intention to come here from Black Iris. The princess still coldly replied, "Forget about those textbook words, Master Yad. We are both pressed for time, you didn't ask me to come here to chat, right?" The sect leader replied, "Well, according to the previous agreement, you give me 4,000 knights, I will give you a place to stay and food." A guard came forward and gave Princess Field the agreement. While reading the agreement, she said, "When will the food be delivered?" The cult leader replied, "I have already arranged for someone to prepare it. As soon as we sign the alliance agreement, the food will be delivered to you immediately." The princess rolled up the agreement and said, "Okay, it's settled." Princess Field left. The courtiers below were in a panic and disgust. One said, "The great leader, allowing the FAO Army to enter like this is too dangerous. There are tens of thousands of knights, what if?" The sect leader raised his hand, "So what, no matter how big the army is, it still needs food." His smile carried a bit of sinister, his hand clenched, "Don't forget their food is in my hands. Remember, give her food every 2 days, if you can, pull it, absolutely cannot let them have any leftover food." The subordinate replied, "Yes." At night, at the port, there were many ships docking. The priest of the main church was waiting for Princess Field to arrive. As soon as he arrived, he said, "Your Highness, now that your people have also come ashore, it's time to hand them over to us." She immediately replied, "Although we have reached the shore, but where is our food? Why can't we see anything?" The priest replied, "Why not, this boat is the food we prepared." Deacon Hong looked at the ship and replied, "The people of the church are playing with us. There are so many of us, only one food ship." The other guy quickly explained, "This is our fault, preparing food also takes time. Moreover, we are giving face, we don't want everyone to starve, so we gave everyone the food from the past 2 days first. If your highness is not satisfied, then we will send the food away, wait until all our food has arrived, then we will send it to you." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Princess Field immediately called out, "Wait, if that's the case, I'll have to trouble you all in the future." He replied smugly, "Consider it as his highness understanding." Deacon Hong angrily replied, "What kind of words are you saying?" The princess immediately stopped them and said, "We will send the men and horses when we are done preparing." The other guy left a few words as he left, "So I'll go back and tell the sect master the good news, so the next food might arrive a little sooner." Deacon Hong angrily clenched his fists and gritted his teeth, "These people." The princess beside him calmly replied, "Don't mind them, they won't be happy for long, besides, how is the matter?" Deacon Hong immediately reported the situation. Orders were passed through the Black Iris network, and everything was proceeding according to the plan she instructed. Now all the scattered fleets of the base have reached the port, completing the infiltration. Perhaps they will regroup in a few weeks. The princess replied with satisfaction, "Fine, just wait, Han Dynasty, I will be back soon." All the soldiers have been disembarked. The next morning, at Haiin City, another fleet of ships set sail after many days of being blockaded. There was a sound in the port. "Hello, seafarer, Haiin City Port, Seaport." This was the fleet of ships bringing merchants and goods back to FAO. On the boat, everyone was offering each other some snacks. The mushroom-headed man said, "After so many days, we can finally travel normally." The man in white laughed loudly and replied, "Ha ha ha, we can finally return home, this time we will definitely make a fortune." But as soon as he finished speaking, something caught his attention. Pointing to the boat that was coming in front of him, he said loudly, "Isn't that the boat of the Torola country?" Then looked at the fleet next to him. Oh, there was Larson too. It turned out that the port storm a few days ago was because of their fight. The mushroom head replied, "Everyone is here, this Han Dynasty is not normally bustling." Suddenly there was a loud call, "Fenton, look here," this name startled Fenton.